Friday, September 5th, 2025. I'm Elin Miller, Chair of the Board, and this meeting is now officially coming to order. Want to start out with just saying a shout out to one of our board members. Ty, thank you for the amazing evening last night and dinner and everything. A lot of work went into that and all the additional assistance you had for that. So again, thank you. It was a good chance to also mingle more with others, and it was great. So thank you. Appreciate that. I'll note that public comment is scheduled today at 9:35 and 11:30. And one note about that, for the 11:30, we have a lot of folks signed up, and we're worried about having enough time. So if we have a shortened time for public comment, whoever signed up for the early one will do that. If we get done early, we may end up starting the Klamath presentations a bit earlier, so it will provide us a little bit of a buffer. So I just wanted to note that up top. And right now, let's see, the Klamath presentations we're starting at 10, so it may start a bit earlier if we get done with our first set of public comments. So everybody knows what's going on. If you would like to provide those verbal comments this morning, please make a request if you're virtual using the chat box, including your name and organization. And again, for everyone present or coming in virtually, the comment time is limited to 3 minutes per person. The meeting is being recorded. Board members and guests, do remember to please state your name for the record in advance of the comments. I'd like to begin by asking a Department of Agriculture Board Coordinator, John Boyce, to review a few additional housekeeping items for us. John?
Hey, good morning. For those attending virtually, if you could remember just to mute your phones and computer audio during the call to prevent background noise coming through. And we request only the board members or presenters when you're presenting to turn on your web camera during the call, just to save bandwidth. And if you are joining by conference call only, the pre-meeting materials are posted on the ODA website at oda.direct/boardagriculture, and I'll post that link in the chat here shortly. And as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and for everyone in the room, if you haven't, please sign in. And again, if you want to make public comment, make that noted on the green sheet over there as well.
Great, thank you very much, John. John, will you please call the roll? Actually, we should have introductions here around the room after the roll call, but I'll start with a roll call. Elin Miller, Umpqua Farmer.
Chad Allen.
Chad Allen, Farmer and Tillman.
Barbara Boyer.
Barbara Boyer, Chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Commission.
Mike Dill.
Mike Dill, Public Member.
Ty Cleaver.
Ty Cleaver, Farmer, Klamath.
Miguel Lopez is excused. Kirk Mogg.
Kirk Mogg, Public Member.
Ellie Norris.
Ellie Norris, Farmer, Umpqua.
Eric Orem.
Good morning, Eric Orem, Farmer from Heppner.
Josh Zielinski.
Good morning, Josh Zielinski, Nurseryman, Salem, Oregon.
And Dean Stacy Simonich is excused, and Director Lisa Sharpelow Hansen.
Good morning, Lisa Sharpelow Hansen, Director, Department of Agriculture.
For those attending virtually, only use the chat box to let me know if you have technical issues. And if you could take a moment to sign in via the chat box, type your name, your organization, and title, that would be great. And I'll only be monitoring that chat box for requests to make comment virtually or those technical issues. And let me look at the attendees. Don't see anyone joining by phone only. We're good.
Okay, are we going to introduce folks that are in the room? Let's start with the gentleman here in the red shirt. We can go around. Thank you. I guess it's red, purple.
My name is Rick Crook. I'm a llama rancher.
Wanda Crook. Sing.
Good morning, Barry Schulberg, Lake County Commissioner. Ron Anderson, rancher.
Amy Fitzpatrick, rancher.
Brian Grable with the Oregon Farm Bureau. Rusty Rock with ODA.
Isaac Stapleton with ODA.
Carla Lamas with ODA. Erica Traer, Simon County Cattlewomen, and representing the cattlemen as well.
Dale Robinette with Diamond Meat Company, a rancher, and I also sit on the Klamath County's Wolf Advisory Board for deprivation.
Casey Prentice, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Lindsay A., Oregon Department of Agriculture.
I'm Joseph Bale with Defenders of Wildlife.
Paul Poister with Nutrient Ag Solutions.
Jonathan Sandow, Oregon Department of
Great. I think we've got everyone. Super. Thank you very much. All right. First agenda item up is the wolf deprivation compensation program, SB 777, that was passed. And we will open it up having Jonathan Sandow, our Deputy Director of ODA, present, which I think he'll be backed up with Sunny Summers, who is there on camera. So thank you, Jonathan. I'll just hand it over to you.
Great.
Good morning, Chair Miller. We're
morning.
going to actually, after Jonathan gives an introduction, we're going to let Brown with ODF and W start.
Okay.
And Roblin, if you want to run the PowerPoint from your computer, a little bit of a change from what we discussed before.
No problem. That's great.
Sorry.
Good deal. Hey, no worries. Okay. So Jonathan will kick off.
Yep, and that's, yep, Sunny kind of filled in the little bit of a change there and then just giving them time to get ready to go. But good morning, Chair Miller, Director Sharplo Hansen, members of the board, Jonathan Sandow, Deputy Director, Oregon Department of Agriculture. Sunny, I will be backing Sunny up and Roblin up today, and so they are going to be doing the kind of the bulk of the presentation. But I think as they're kind of getting ready for the PowerPoint and pieces, I wanted to kind of set some context around why we're here today, why we're talking about this, and kind of what we're hoping to achieve within the next 45 minutes or so of presenting. And that is really to say that Oregon, ODFW has the wolf management side of kind of like the wolf population in Oregon, and that is with that agency underneath their jurisdictions and authorities. ODA has the grant program that helps compensate ranchers for livestock depredation, for implementation of kind of the preventative measures, and then also a little bit on county financial assistance to help administer the program. In this previous session, and we'll kind of go into the details, but there was a policy bill that made some big changes to this program for the first time in a while. And so, again, those big policy bills, right? Those set the law. Those are the pieces that then we are tasked with implementing. We go into the rulemaking phase, which is really, putting finer details within the policy bills, unpacking a little bit of here and there, on where we can make, any of the programs, clearer, more efficient, being able to better operate. And really that is, we are about to embark on that rulemaking process for Senate Bill 777. And so today is really a continuation of what we were doing last week. We went into Prineville and LeGrand, and we did kind of just listening sessions. What do you want the RAC to consider when they sit down and convene? What are those pieces that these are not comments for proposed rules. We're not taking kind of, in that retrospect, we're really asking folks to come and say, okay, when the RAC sits down and they start talking, when we start drafting those rules, where are the areas that we really need to start having some conversation? What are areas that maybe we're not thinking about that we want to start having conversations within the full context of what's within the law and what's allowed within the rulemaking process? And so to help with that, Roblin, we asked ODFW to kind of be here today to give a context around the wolf conservation management side of it, not for, folks to be able to weigh in on it, because that, again, that's not what we do with the Oregon Department of Ag, but really to help set the context and then understand where we come in with the grant program, and really why we're here today talking about that.
Yeah. Jonathan, could you also just do a decoder ring for RAC for some people who might be here? They're kind of wondering what that is.
Yeah. So we like acronyms, and we move quickly. But that is a rules advisory committee, and that is really kind of within, and Sunny will kind of unpack the rulemaking process later. But that is that's what the RAC stands for, is a rules advisory committee. So with that, Roblin, are we ready to go on your end?
You're on mute, Roblin. We kind of threw her for a loop. So appreciate everybody's patience.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've got 3 screens and my mouse is not moving left to right on them, so I have to jump around a little.
No problem, Robin.
Okay, so for the record, I'm Roblin Brown from Enterprise, Oregon. Are you now seeing my first intro slide? Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Miller, Director Sharpelos, Hanson, and members of the board. Thank you for your opportunity to present about Oregon wolf management. I am the wolf coordinator for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'll talk briefly about wolves, their legal status, and the most challenging part of wolf management, livestock depredation. Since I'm doing this remotely, it's possible that it'll take a minute for my slides to get to you. Not sure why you're not seeing the second slide.
Yeah, we're still on the first. Do we have the deck here that we can advance for them?
I think you should have it.
Might take us a second to figure out where that is. So are you all the way up in Enterprise and that's why it's not advancing?
Possibly. But I do have broadband here though. I've got a good connection.
Well, I live in the sticks too, and it's kind of hard to sometimes. So.
Sure.
Anybody have a joke? No, well, no, Ty, no.
Okay, I'll save us from any bad jokes. So I'll go ahead and start.
Yeah, if you could just do intro and we'll catch up. Here, we're on number 2 now. Good.
There we go. Good. Awesome. Thank you for your patience. Whenever I talk about ODFW and wolves, I always start with the Oregon Wolf Conservation and Management Plan. After a lengthy stakeholder process, the biggest that ODFW had ever done at that point, the Oregon Wolf Plan, which was really a negotiated agreement, was first adopted by the Fish and Wildlife Commission in 2005. That was 20 years ago, and it was 3 years before any wolves were resident in the state. And it still guides our day-to-day activities. The plan incorporates the original guidance from the commission. It allowed for conservation as required by law, but no reintroduction. All wolves either walked or swam across the Snake River into Oregon or were born here. It provides relief for livestock producers and addresses impacts to deer and elk. It allows for flexibility in managing as the wolf population increases, including controlled take when approved by the commission. The 2005 plan also recommended that the state legislature approve a compensation program for livestock producers affected by wolf depredation. Defenders of Wildlife paid for compensation until the statute was passed in 2011, and ODA has handled it ever since. The plan is evaluated and updated if necessary every 5 years. There were minor modifications made to the plan and Oregon administrative rules in 2010, 2013, 2019, and the plan was reviewed in 2024. Next slide, please. Oh, much faster. In Oregon, wolves are delisted from the State Endangered Species Act and protected statewide as a special status game mammal. It's illegal to kill them except under certain circumstances described in administrative rule and statute. The wolf plan has a 3-phased approach to address both conservation and management needs in the eastern and western halves of Oregon, separately, based on the number of breeding pairs. A breeding pair is defined as an adult male and adult female with at least 2 pups that survived to December 31st of their first year. The red line separates the west and east wolf management zones. I'm still on the state status slide if you want to back up one. Thank you. Awesome. The west zone is in phase 1. It takes 4 breeding pairs for 3 consecutive years to meet the objective to move to phase 2, and 7 breeding pairs for 3 consecutive years to move into phase 3. We documented 7 breeding pairs in the west zone during the last winter count, and this is the first year towards meeting both of those criteria. So if at least 7 breeding pairs are documented at the end of 2025 and 2026, West Wolf Management Zone will move directly into phase 3, skipping phase 2. The importance is that phase 2 and 3 allow more flexibility for caught in the act take by livestock producers and for ODFW to authorize lethal removal for wolves in chronic depredation situations. The east zone that's had wolves longer is already in phase 3 and will stay in phase 3 as long as there are at least 7 breeding pairs, and there were 10 in 2024. Next slide, please.
We can't hear you if you went on mute again.
Thank you. Okay, I need a second to fix this up. Almost there. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. So for the federal status of wolves, it varies based on their location in the state. Wolves are listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act for the western 3/4 of the state. That's that gray striped area left of the blue line. ODFW is the face of wolf management in Oregon, and we implement the wolf plan statewide. East of the blue line, ODFW makes all management decisions according to the wolf plan, but in the federally protected area, only the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has authority to make decisions about harassment or lethal removal, and lethal removal is rarely authorized. Next slide, please. We monitor the Oregon wolf population intensively. We collected over 20,000 location data points during 2024 from over 150 trail cameras, 47 radio collared wolves, and follow up on wolf reports from the public. The statewide 2024 year-end minimum count of wolves in Oregon was 204 individuals. This annual wolf count is done during the winter after December 31st, when individuals of a pack are most likely to be traveling together, so they're easier to find and count. The minimum count is not an estimate based on a population model. This count is known wolves verified through tracks, photographs, or seen on aerial surveys during a 3-month period. Not all wolves can be counted, so there could be more than 204 wolves in Oregon at the end of the year. A pack is defined as 4 or more wolves traveling together during the winter, and we located 25 packs at the end of 2024. Statewide, we documented 17 breeding pairs for 2024. Next slide, please. This chart shows the increasing annual counts of wolves since 2009 to our highest count in 2024. The map shows the statewide distribution of Oregon's wolf population. After starting in Wallowa County in 2008, the wolf population has continued to expand its range westward. A dispersing wolf looking for a new territory can be anywhere in Oregon. The areas mapped in blue indicate resident wolf territories. It could be a single wolf, a new pair, or a pack using that area. Next slide, please. As wolves have expanded, there's been conflict where wolves and livestock overlap. The majority of ODFW's wolf management efforts are focused on responding to and reducing conflict. This is a high priority for us and the most challenging issue with wolves. Our staff provides tools, assistance, technical advice to livestock producers. We also radio collar, monitor, and remove wolves to reduce conflict. Based on Oregon statute and rule, ODFW does the evidence-based livestock investigations to determine if wolves were involved in the death or injury of livestock or livestock working dogs. The investigator will first visit with the livestock owner, learn about what they saw or what they know about the situation. Then the investigator will examine the injured or dead livestock animal and explore the scene where an attack may have happened. Since 2023, ODFW has authorized USDA Wildlife Services to also make determinations, and they follow the same protocol. The investigator makes one of 4 determinations. If the physical evidence shows that a wolf or wolves attacked the livestock animal, then it's called confirmed. The finding is probable when there is evidence of an attack and the non-definitive evidence suggests it was more likely caused by a wolf than by another predator. Compensation is paid on both confirmed and probable determinations. The finding is not wolf when the physical evidence indicates that a wolf did not attack the animal, and sometimes there's not enough physical evidence to determine if wolves were involved or not, so then it's unknown. ODFW or Wildlife Services needs to make the determination if the livestock producer wants financial compensation for the depredation or for it to count towards lethal removal of chronically depredating wolves. Some counties have their sheriff deputies attend. Their assistance can be helpful, but they're not authorized to make determinations. Our commission and the agency recognize that the importance of assisting livestock producers on working land, and we recently have made some changes to be more effective and bring more resources to bear. We have streamlined our internal processes, we've increased our partnership with USDA Wildlife Services, and we funded Western Landowners Alliance. We're most effective when we collaborate with other agencies and groups that are working on the same issue. And ODFW has provided funding to get WLA started in Oregon because of the success they've had collaborating with stakeholders in Western states. Western Landowners Alliance, WLA, is a landowner-led group that is looking out for Western private landowners in many capacities, anything from water issues to wolf issues. ODFW has awarded them a grant over the next 5 years to provide additional resources and to be a voice for landowners responding to these difficult wolf issues. WLA made a guidebook there on the bottom left of that slide that explains about identifying depredation. It's available from your local district ODFW biologist or the ODA or ODFW website. Next slide, please. This graph shows the number of things. This slide shows the number of depredation events that were confirmed as wolf caused in the West and East wolf management zones. Statewide, confirmed depredation events decreased slightly from 76 to 73 in 2024. But the last 4 years have seen much more depredation than the first 10 years. There's no single cause for this increase. We continue to assess the many variables to understand the situations when livestock are most vulnerable, so the resources can be focused and managed adaptively to assist ranchers. One thing that makes challenges for the grant program and county compensation committees is the variations in depredation from year to year. The packs that depredate and the counties that need more funding to assist producers will change each year. And one year it might be sheep producers that need assistance in one area of a county, and the next year it might be cow-calf operations in multiple areas. It's helpful to have flexibility in handling emerging and concentrated conflict areas. Livestock producers in some areas of the East Wolf Management Zone have been sharing the landscape with wolves for more than 15 years. So many of them are experienced at reducing conflict. Ranchers there deserve credit for expending time, energy, and money to reduce the vulnerability of their livestock, and they still need financial assistance since depredation is still occurring. And as we'll move into a new area, depredation has expanded into those areas. More than half of the ranchers that experience depredation in most years have never had a depredation before, so they have a lot to learn about wolf conflict and how to avoid it. Annually, 65% of livestock producers that experienced a depredation event did not experience another depredation the same calendar year. So that also means that the other 35% did have at least one more, and sometimes producers experienced several. Next slide, please. Of the just under 700 animals confirmed killed or injured by wolves since 2009, beef calves are the most common livestock attacked. Sheep are next, with yearling and adult cattle third. About 80% of depredations happen on private land. That's including commercial timberlands. Depredation's most common in the spring and fall on cattle and large pastures. Young beef calves are most vulnerable in the spring when cattle are first put out into larger private land pastures. As soon as the elk calves and deer fawns are born, depredation decreases for June and July. Then in the fall, as the young natural prey has become harder to catch, producers see more depredation on the open range allotments. The large pasture depredations are the ones that are hardest to locate and confirm as wolf depredation. Not all wolves or packs depredate, but in any given year, about 40% of the packs do have known depredations. Next slide, please. The goal is to reduce wolf livestock conflict. In all phases of wolf management, the wolf plan sets the expectation that non-lethal measures to protect livestock will be used before lethal removal is considered. Cleaning up carcasses and bone piles is possibly the most effective proactive method to avoid attracting wolves to areas with livestock. Tools like fladry, fencing, dogs, or sound and light devices can be effective in smaller pastures. And sheep operations are accustomed to protecting sheep from coyotes, but wolves require more resources: larger guard dogs, nighttime fencing, and more herder presence. Success protecting sheep can be very high, but it is resource dependent. It more often involves human presence, like range riders or herders in large pastures. A great deal of effort and expense has been taken on by livestock producers to prevent and react to conflict situations. The ODA Compensation Grant Program has been instrumental in providing funds to help livestock producers. Other resources for assistance and technical advice are ODFW, USDA Wildlife Services, NRCS, and WLA. Conflict minimization always starts with deterrence. Since non-lethals are not 100% effective, sometimes lethal removal is necessary. If appropriate, non-lethal measures have been implemented, and there is a chronic, if appropriate non-lethal measures have been implemented and there is chronic depredation situation, the department can issue limited duration permits to a livestock producer to shoot on site. Another option is agency removal, where ODFW or Wildlife Services staff remove the wolf. In federally delisted areas, the wolf plan and OARs allow a rancher or their agent to kill a wolf that's attacking their livestock with certain rules. The wolf needs to be caught in the act of fighting, wounding, killing, or chasing livestock or working dogs on their property or lands they lawfully occupied, and no permit is needed. This combination of implementing non-lethal and lethal measures, in addition to other factors, has allowed for Oregon's wolf population to increase, while depredation events and livestock losses have grown at a lower rate. Two things are necessary for this to continue. Livestock producers need to have the desire and financial ability, which may mean assistance, to use tools and techniques to protect their livestock. And when that doesn't work, lethal removal needs to be available and used as a tool to reduce depredation. Next slide, please. Outreach is key to helping reduce risk to livestock. One-on-one conversation with ranchers are the most valuable. Our 5 wolf biologists and local district biologists share the depredation experiences ranchers have had statewide, since we've seen some issues repeat themselves over and over, like bone piles and carcasses attracting wolves to winter feeding and calving pastures. We share innovation successes that other ranchers have thought up to solve their challenges, not telling anyone how to run their ranch, but giving options that they might consider. We share information with livestock producers about past wolf movements that can help inform their livestock management decisions. We continue to share important wolf information with livestock producers and others on our website. In 2022, the department launched a new mobile-friendly web pages with the goal of making it easier and more efficient for the public to get information about wolves in Oregon. This renovated site provides the latest updates and information about wolf biology, wolf management, specific Oregon wolves, including county maps and individual pack information, livestock conflict, as well as an online form for reporting a wolf sighting. We also send email notifications to nearly 14,000 people signed up to receive wolf updates. Next slide, please. So I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions now, or I don't know if you want to wait till after Jonathan and Sunny's presentation.
So I think if board members have kind of questions around the ODFW management piece of it, I think now's a good time to ask and answer those. I'll say one, thank you, Robin, and thank you to ODFW for being able to provide that context. Where the handoff really happens between ODFW and ODA is after they've conducted their investigations around the depredations. I think they're trying to remember from the staff folks in Prineville. I think there's 4 kind of outcomes of those investigations. What qualifies folks, if they choose again to apply for the grant program, are really around confirmed and then probable wolf depredations, reports from the ODFW. Again, we're not involved in the investigation side of it. We're not involved in the determination side of it. We're not even involved in the in folks choosing to apply or not apply for it. But those are what kind of opens up the eligibility. So we'll kind of maybe let Robin stay online for a little bit and answer questions.
Yeah. Elon Miller for the record. Robin, could you just describe, I'm just with coyote issues and with sheep, but if we're looking at a situation where there's a kill of a calf, just walk me through what a rancher needs to be thinking about and doing at that right after that. Based upon, I assume you have that manual and stuff and it talks practically, but I'm just trying to understand that practical step.
I think maybe you're asking, Chair Miller, what to do before we get there. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because you likely won't be able to get there right away. So what's the, I mean, obviously maybe call you is the first thing, but if you could just step through that, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. It's sometimes not possible for a producer to tell if it's depredation just by looking at the animal. Wolves have very blunt teeth. They don't tear and rip that much. So it's really important for a producer to consider the fact that it might be predation. Of course, it's more likely to be a lot of other causes than depredation, because depredation is reasonably rare when you're looking at livestock death. But it is important to be thinking about depredation from a predator, and then go ahead and calling. So that could be calling a wildlife services agent if they're in that particular county, or ODFW. Some counties set it up so that you can call the sheriff's office, and that way they know who to call and who's on, and get a response. And so when we looked at the first 13 years that we did depredation investigations, it turned out that we averaged showing up on site in about 2 hours. So it's usually pretty quick that we're there. But it's really important as we move into more depredation across the state, more wolves, more issues, that livestock producers understand that there are things that they need to do right away. And I think that's what you're asking, Chair Miller, is just, yes. It's really important. Yeah, if you have a tarp, to cover it up. Now, on a hot day, that could increase the damage from heat, but protecting it from more predators and scavenging from other scavengers is really, really important. And if it's, we're getting to the point now where if it's something that's like an injured animal that's already fine and in a pasture, we may not show up in 2 hours. We might not show up until a little bit later. And so it's just really important to protect that animal and put it in a safe enclosure somewhere. But otherwise, covering it with a tarp, covering a sign that you might see on the ground, like with a coffee can or something, just kind of over a wolf track. Tracks are not always indicative of what killed the animal, but it is kind of nice to be able to see what else is on the scene. But normally what we do is our investigation is we take a look at the animal, and usually wolf depredation is quite obvious when you're skinning that animal. But it's important for livestock producers to know that they are absolutely more than welcome to go ahead and take some clippers and shave the areas where wolves most likely attack on the hindquarters above the hocks. And they might make a decision then that, hey, I don't have time to call out ODFW and Wildlife Services, and I've taken a look at this now, and I don't actually think this has anything to do with predation. And those are some of the things that they might learn by looking at that guide that we've created with Wildlife Services and WLA.
Okay, Robin, thank you for a neophyte here. That was really helpful. So, okay, let's move in. Any other questions here? I don't see a mic down. So let's go ahead and move in, I guess, with Sunny.
Good morning, Chair Miller, Director Sharplow, Hanson, and members of the board. My name is Sunny Summers. I'm a senior policy advisor with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And I am the person that the county wolf committees get to work with on the grant program. So let's see if I can get this. I think Jonathan's going to start with the introduction, and then I'll get into the nuts and bolts of how we manage the program.
So actually, I think we can probably move through this slide pretty quickly, because I think we've been able to kind of cover that both in the pre-slide and then on through Robin's presentation. But really, I mean, this program's been in existence since 2011, and it really has been, for the most part, kind of unchanged. And so, really, with the passage of 777, it's one of the big first times that we're kind of able to go back and apply a lot of the lessons learned and a lot of what we're able to take, from the counties, what counties and ranchers have learned and what we have learned, and kind of put it all together. And so, Sunny will be able to kind of walk through the grant program here pretty quickly.
Do you want to talk about how it's funded, Jonathan?
Yep. I'll cover this slide. So the things that we can't control, right, is the law, and then the funding, and so there's kind of really two mechanisms of funding for, maybe three, but like two mechanisms of funding for the WOLF program, and that is we have within, we talked about our budget pretty extensively yesterday, within what we call our base budget, the budget that kind of keeps rolling from biennium to biennium. We have about $240,000 that is kind of just, it lives within our base budget to allocate over the biennium, so 2 years. The legislature we have received an additional kind of $1 million in the last biennium, and then again in this biennium to augment into that program, bringing that total amount to about $1.2 million with state funds, and that is what we're able then to really kind of open up into a grant process. It is administered by ODA. But it really is a county-run program, and this is done by design by the legislature. This is part of the legal apparatus that administers this program. And during the introductions of folks in the room today, there's county commissioners that sit on those Wolf County committees. There are producers, and then kind of the conservation, representations on those county committees. And they are the ones that ultimately are taking in all the application requests from the livestock producers, looking at them, and then they submit block grant requests to ODA, and then we administer, essentially block funding back to the counties, and then they're the ones that are distributing the funds to the individual producers. We don't actually make the determination and cut the checks to the individual producers. That's all done on the county level for a lot of good reasons, and so that is really kind of how the whole process works. Is legislature authorizes and provides the funding. We're kind of that financial administrator to the county programs. The county programs are really the ones that are able to walk through and really do a lot of the assessment, the methodologies, and those types of things.
Thank you.
I think we can go to the next.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of talk about the 4 parts that counties have been able to apply for. So that payment for livestock or working dogs that are killed or injured by wolves. And as Roblin talked about, that's for confirmed or probable.
Are we on the right slide?
Yes.
Okay.
This grant program runs from February 1st through January 31st. And so the counties are applying for depredations that happened in the previous year. And then they're asking for prevention funds for the year looking forward. So it's a little bit confusing, but those depredation payments are looking backwards. So the livestock producers apply to the county committees, and then they submit that with their application for the current year. This program has had a section that allows for missing animals due to wolves, and then also counties can apply for a certain percentage of funding to help cover the costs of running the program. So basically, once a county has a committee, as Jonathan described, it has to have, in statute, it has to have a certain number of producers, a certain number of folks who represent conservation concerns, and county commissioners, and then public members. So once they have a established committee, then they are responsible for making sure that they receive the applications, that they set the fair market value or set the rate for what they're going to pay for those livestock or working dogs that have been killed, confirmed or probable. And then the county may apply for prevention funds themselves. Maybe it makes sense for the county to have certain materials on hand to hand out to livestock producers for preventative methods, or the livestock producer themselves may apply to the county and say, I want to apply for a certain number of range rider hours, for example. So when the county submits the application to ODA, it can come both of those routes, whatever they decide is appropriate for their county. We talked about funding a little bit. We do apply for a federal grant whenever that grant is open. We've been successful. This year, we're waiting to find out if we're successful or not. But as I said, we do apply. So I like to tell the county staff that I work with, I feel your pain on filling out grant application materials because I'm doing it at my level as well. And then we pull those funds that we received for the biennium and basically divide it up for 2 years. So for the last 2 years, you can see 24, we issued grants a little over 787,000, in 25, a little over 729,000. And that was basically splitting it up. If a county does not use their prevention funds, in any given year, they are required to return that back to ODA, and we put it back in the pool of funds for the next grant cycle. So where did we issue grant funds in 25? We paid those depredation requests at 100%. I think we have prioritized paying those at 100% since the program started, although I came in like 2020. This year, we did not pay any missing. And we capped prevention requests at 100,000. We paid a minimum of 50%. What we do is we look at information from our partners at ODF and W, and those counties that have a higher number of wolf packs, of total depredations or depredating packs, receive an additional amount. In previous years, we have done like a 60-40 split, looking at the counties that way. And then we capped the administrative costs at 2,000 and paid those at 100%. Things are changing pretty significantly. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jonathan to describe Senate Bill 777 and its changes.
So that's a lot of background to get to. Why are we here today? And why are we, bringing this, one in front of the Board of Ag, and then two, kind of running a little bit of a different process in terms of, taking a lot of listening session comments from folks before we commence the rulemaking process. And that is because, we know what we know, but we also want to be able to make sure that as we go through that process that we're capturing things, early, and we're being able to have the conversations that folks are going to want that RAC to have, in a more meaningful and more deliberate way, quicker, because we're on a bit of a timeline. We want to be able to get through this entire process in order for, the full program that Senate Bill 777 has put in place to be ready to go for when we open those grant applications in February of 26. And so, we'll talk about what Senate Bill 777 has changed. Those are kind of those fixed pieces, and then again I'll briefly kind of run through what we heard in Prineville and LeGrand, and then hopefully being able to hear, this morning, both virtually and in person from folks who were really going to, really focus on, what they would like to see that RAC conversation look like around the administration of these grant funds, and how it, what works well and what would like to be improved within the changes of 777. So Sunny had mentioned prior, the previous program allowed for missing claims. And that's an area that was removed from the program. And so really now when we're looking at the depredation, it really is just the probable and confirmed death or injury for the animals that folks are able to apply for and that we're able to pay out. We have paid out 100% of that since the beginning of the program. We will continue to prioritize that and work within some of the changing hydraulics of the funding side. We'll get to that in a sec. But then the other piece, kind of in concert to removing the missing, there was a robust conversation within the legislature around the kind of uncaptured indirect expenses that occur when livestock and wolf conflict exists, and that is weight loss, birthing rates, stress on the herd, time of folks implementing a lot of different things. And so there was I think the legislators looked at some other state models and adopted a multiplier effect for that fair market value. And so once kind of the counties and on the application side established that fair market value, counties are able then to approve up to three times that fair market value or 5 times that fair market value, depending on what the animal species type is, with a cap of $25,000 per animal claim. And that's a big change. We have lots of kind of questions around kind of how that's going to work within the county side. That'll be a good conversation within the RAC process. And then the other big change that occurred was the prior statute required that 30% of all the funds that are allocated to the program, I should say state funds, we can't condition the federal dollars, but like the 30% of the state funds that are allocated to the program go towards preventative non-lethal measures, and that increased to 50% within the 777. I will say, we've been, all the reports, all the information is up on our website and readily available. And we have typically been around 65 to 70% of the funds going towards that. But you saw the graph of depredations, and they've gone up a lot. And so that's changing kind of how much funding goes towards the depredation bucket and then is made available for the preventative measures. And so as we respond to those, that little bit of a hydraulic change in terms of now it's going up to 50%. Depredations are going up. You add the multiplier on top of that. I think we are now going to be really having to manage to that 50% level, whereas before we were able to pay all the depredation claims, and we had more than 30% available for preventative. That was easy math for us to do. This is going to be a little bit different and potentially a little bit challenging to balance. One of the big conversations that we had in both Prineville and LeGrand was who's responsible for managing that 50%? Is it 50% on the county level, or is it 50% at the state level? And we are interpreting that, and we are going to be operating that is 50% at the state level. And so, if a county has very little amount of depredation, but maybe the wolf presence is new and they want a bit more preventative measures, they don't have to stay in that 50% balance. We have to maintain the program over the statewide apparatus to be in that 50% balance. So that was one of the good conversation points that we had in both communities. The other one was, and one that we know that the RAC will likely talk a lot about too, is around that multiplier effect. The 3 to 5 times fair market value is when we get into hypothetical situations where we're gonna, where we've hit the 50% kind of cap around the depredation side of it. Do we go back to the counties and start kind of, doing 80%, 80 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollar just on the multiplier side before you touch the fair market value, or do we look at that as a whole block of funding? And that's one thing that I think we will be able to unpack and really discuss through the rulemaking process. And we will lean on those experts who sit on that rack to really help us navigate, how folks want it. At the end of the day, this is a program for our livestock producers. It needs to work for them. There are things that we can't, we have to implement, right? We have our auditing responsibilities, we have our financial responsibilities, we have our legal ones. But really it is like, how can we make this the most effective, the most, efficient program for the counties and then ultimately to the livestock producers. I think we have one more slide, or maybe that might be the,
yeah. And just to kind of talk about what the next steps are. Jonathan's talked about this RAC, this Rules Advisory Committee. We will have a set of draft rules to take to that committee. Those meetings will be held virtually, just like I'm sitting here virtually, and are open to the public. However, only RAC members will be invited to speak at those meetings. And we will get a diversity of producers from around the state, commissioners or county staff that work on this grant program, as well as folks who represent conservation concerns and our partners at ODF&W, and sit there and really dig into the meat of those rules. Once the RAC is complete, the agency will take those comments into consideration, make any updates to the rules, and then they will be filed as proposed with the Oregon Secretary of State. That starts a open public comment period time. We will hold a virtual meeting for folks to give verbal comments, as well as have a time open for written comments. We take those comments into consideration, make any changes to the rules that we think we can do, again, within statutory constraints, and then we will file them as final. As Jonathan said, our goal is to get these done probably by the end of the year or early January, so that we have them in place for the next grant cycle. If you want to stay informed about all of this, you can go to ODA's rulemaking webpage and sign up for an email list. That page can be accessed from the Wolf webpage, which is linked here, the oda.direct/wolf, or if you go to oda.direct/rulemaking, that will take you to the page. You're also welcome to reach out to me. I wear the rulemaking coordinator hat for the agency as well. And so with that, I would turn it over to the board for any questions.
All right. Before questions, can you just, again, for the benefit of the audience, the comment period, anticipated time? I know there's requirements, but once your rule comes out.
I anticipate holding the RAC late September to middle of October. And then the rules will probably be filed as proposed in November. And so that comment period will be open at least for 28 days, if not a little bit longer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any questions from board members? Yes.
Ted Allen, for the record. I was interested in a little more clarification around, I thought in the first presentation it was noted that there's a significant increase in kills in conflicts with the wolves, but I thought you said that you didn't really know the particular reason. I wonder if you could elaborate on what ODF&W's thoughts are around the huge increase in conflict now.
I don't know do we still have ODF&W on? Robin, are you still on?
Robin's on, it is.
Okay, I couldn't see. All right, great.
Yeah, I'm on. Thanks for the question. There's a lot of factors. What I don't know is the importance of all of them, and I figured all of them out, but if you're asking about what the increase in depredation causes it has a lot to do with the fact that we have wolves in a lot more areas that overlap livestock now. We have it in a lot more areas where wolves no longer have kind of a refuge area where they can go away from livestock. They're mostly maybe overlapping livestock the entire year, for the entire pack area. We also have mild winters for the last few years. Those mild winters are really good for deer and elk survival. And so that makes it harder for wolves to capitalize on their natural prey because they're not weak, they're not starving. And so they also have the ability to learn how to hunt livestock, and some packs have learned to do that. So they have learned that there's certain areas that make livestock more vulnerable. It might be a small pasture in the winter, a small pasture that could have flag area around it, but if it doesn't have flag area around it, those livestock are more vulnerable. So there's a lot of things that have to do with how livestock are managed. And as new livestock producers are dealing with this new issue to them, some changes happen, and those changes have been very successful in some areas, but they haven't been implemented in other areas. One of those is the cleaning up of bone piles is obviously one of the biggest things. Wolves are scavengers, foremost. They can be lazy like all animals, and they sometimes prioritize, served up bone piles where they're constantly being fed during the winter calving season. There's always some loss there. And so cleaning those up is one of the biggest things. And those haven't been cleaned up in a lot of our valleys. A lot of places where they're just now experiencing wolves, there's also a lot of attractants in those areas. Those are some of the things that got cleaned up the first and foremost in Wallowa County that showed very, very successful in certain areas to reduce depredation and reduce the presence of wolves in the valleys.
Thank you, Robin. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions from the directors for the group? Really appreciate this. I think really appreciate the fact that we've had a couple workshops already to provide, early comments for the RAC's benefit. And then as a board, this was a really important piece of legislation that was important that we as a board would also use this time in our session to be able to hear from individuals. I was dead wrong on the timing because we actually have 10 people signed up for the first comment period. That's 15 minutes, and 10 times 3 I think is 30, plus up and back and whatever. So I think what we're going to do is we will extend the time frame for this first comment period for as long as it takes. Again, it's only 30 minutes per person, but for as long as it takes, and then we'll go ahead and have a brief break, but we'll be likely starting the Laguama discussion 15, 20 minutes late, I'm kind of guessing at this stage. So just for people's planning purposes. And John, I want to make sure I got that right. Okay, good deal. Good. You keep me straight. So, okay, what we'll do is we'll go for, again, thank you, Jonathan and Robin and Sunny. Appreciate that lead in for this. We'll go with virtual first, and I have from Oregon Farm Bureau, actually we're not only on wolf, we're on Laguama, so it's kind of a mix of comments, so we'll have to keep this straight in our minds here. But Laura Quincy, Oregon Farm Bureau, will be testifying regarding the wolf package. So Lauren, are you on? And because we were going to start that testimony a little later, she might not be. So I'm going to skip and come back. Danny Lytle, Oregonians for Food and Shelter.
Hi, good morning. I'm here.
Hey, Danny, thank you. Appreciate you leading in. And you're going to be chatting about our next subject. So, so that's the Laguama. So, Danny, go ahead. And we've got we'll do green light, and you're remote, so we'll be warning on yellow, but again, 3 minutes. So go ahead, get started. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the board. As you mentioned, my name is Danny Lytle, and I serve as Policy and Stewardship Director for Oregonians for Food and Shelter. OFS is a coalition including agricultural commodity groups and the forest products sector, which come together to ensure science-based policies related to production tools, including fertilizers. I'm also a member of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee for Fertilizer Management in the LGWAMA. I appreciate the opportunity to share my perspective with you today. Before I get into the substance of the rules, I would like to thank ODA, especially Renee and Isaac, for their communication and receptivity to feedback throughout the rulemaking process so far. Overall, we support the goal of this rulemaking to protect groundwater quality in the LUB. But my experience on the RAC has highlighted provisions in the draft rules that, as written, raise serious concerns about whether the rules will be both effective and workable for producers. One critical concern is how producer compliance with the annual nitrogen plans would be evaluated. The draft rules rely on 3 methods of partial nitrogen balance, post-harvest soil nitrate testing, and yield targets. Each of these is problematic. A nitrogen balance of 0 assumes 100% or a near 100% nitrogen use efficiency that isn't biologically realistic. Post-harvest soil tests penalize crops like potatoes and onions, which naturally release nitrogen after harvest. And evaluating the nitrogen plan based on yield ignores the many factors outside of grower control like weather or pests. Collectively, these methods risk mischaracterizing responsible practices as failures, which would erode producer trust and confidence in the rulemaking program. Equally concerning is the proposal to judge the success of the rules based on residual deep soil nitrate levels. Residual nitrate is highly variable within and between fields and strongly influenced by rainfall, drought, and the crop being grown. Notably, no other state has adopted deep soil nitrate levels for evaluating the regulatory success of their program. In fact, California's expert panel specifically advised against it during the development of their irrigated lands regulatory program. In addition to these primary issues, there are several practical challenges worth noting. ODA does not have an estimate of the number of producers or number of acres that would be impacted by the different rule requirements. The rules timelines for fertilizer application and soil sampling do not align well with the realities of crop production in the basin. And the financial burden of new equipment and lab fees will be significant. It's also unclear whether regional laboratories have the capacity to process the required volume of soil samples in the timeframes that are specified. Taken together, these concerns raise real questions about whether the rules, as written, will deliver meaningful water quality improvements. I've provided alternative suggestions for several of these concerns in my written comments that are in your packet. We urge the board to raise these issues with ODA and encourage revisions that reflect both sound science and practical realities. Doing so will create a stronger, more credible program that achieves its intended goals while sustaining agriculture in the LUB. Thank you for your time and your attention this morning.
Danny, thank you, and right on time. Appreciate that. So actually, I'm going to ask if Lauren Quincy is on yet. Okay. We'll go back later. Next, again, another comment regarding LGWAMA is Justin Green with the Water for Eastern Oregon. Justin, you should be there virtually.
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, and you can go ahead and proceed.
Great, thank you. Director Hansen, Chair Miller, members of the board. My name is Justin Green. I'm the Executive Director of Water for Eastern Oregon. Prior to this role, I was the Water Quality Administrator at DEQ for just under 4 years. Water for Eastern Oregon is a nonprofit coalition of businesses and community organizations in Morrow Uintah counties supporting efforts to provide clean drinking water to every household and resident. H2OEO is committed to supporting long-term efforts to reduce groundwater nitrate concentrations. I would like to first thank ODA staff, specifically Sunny, Isaac, and Renee, for their efforts in this rulemaking. So far, they have provided an excellent public process with clear expectations, strong back and forth, and there's a clear and obvious dedication to the rulemaking. While there has been strong back and forth, we do have concerns regarding the rules. The rulemaking was initially proposed to mandate that farmers develop and adhere to a nutrient management plan that the department can review during the strategic implementation area process. We feel that the scope of the rules have expanded to include prohibitions on specific agricultural practices and imposes significant reporting burdens. Another concern is just we don't feel it's very clear how the requirements of this rule, specifically the different documentation and sampling requirements under this rule, are protective of landowners' privacy. And just finally, I believe that the RAC meeting later this month is scheduled to be the last RAC meeting for this rulemaking, and just wanted to put it on the department and the board's radar that I do believe an additional meeting will be required. And I just also like to echo the comments that Danny made prior to me. But thank you very much for the opportunity to provide these comments.
Justin, thank you for your comments. Appreciate that. Also, I have, with a name like Elin that gets mispronounced all the time, I should be right about, it's Lauren Kinsey. And Lauren, you may not have realized that I was calling on you from Oregon Farm Bureau for a 3 minutes on wolf. Okay, maybe she's still in process, or you're on mute. Thought you were right there. Let's see. All right, we may be having technical difficulties with Lauren, so maybe in the interim, because of time, we can go ahead and try to get that rectified and get Lauren up a little bit later. So sorry about that, Lauren, on both counts. Here present at this meeting is Paul Poister with Nutrien. And I'll ask Paul to come forward, and he too will be providing comments regarding Guama. So Paul?
Chair Miller, Director and board members, for the record, Paul Poister. I am the Manager of State Government Affairs for Nutrien Ag Solutions. We're a retail supplier across the state of Oregon. I also serve as the chair of the Far West Agribusiness Association Government Affairs Committee, and proudly, for the last several months, have had the opportunity to serve on the Rules Advisory Committee for the Guama rulemaking process. I'll be real short in the interest of time, but did publicly want to thank Sunny, Isaac, Renee, all of the ODA staff who have been involved in this. It is a very complex and broad issue for us to be tackling. The way the department staff has managed the process has been extraordinary, I think, and echo the comments of the first two speakers in that regard. I also want to mention it, and Director, you and I have talked about this in the past. I think the RAC structure in this rulemaking has really been well thought out. It's a very broad set of voices that are working together on this, very constructively and cooperatively, in spite of probably us all not sharing the exact same opinions on a lot of the issues we're tackling. OFS and Danny have put together some pretty extensive and technical comments that we associate ourselves with. We've tried to combine some of those from the ag groups, but a couple real quick I wanted to touch on. I think Justin also mentioned them. Just the number of operations and growers that'll be covered. Is 1,000+ acres correct? Should we wrap in some of the smaller operations? Perhaps someplace in the middle may be a place where we end up finally putting this together. The questions about timing for soil sampling and fertilizer applications, we're still working through that, and when best during the year some of those steps ought to be taken. And then Justin brought up the question of increased costs, and the RAC has been asked by staff to start putting together real specific thoughts on the fiscal impact, and I know we'll continue to do that because it goes beyond sampling and product application, but also in some cases growers may have to make significant investments in new equipment, and so we want to make sure we're able to put together that information during this stage in the rulemaking. Finally, I just want to share a final comment that as this process moves forward every member of the RAC shares the exact same goal, and that is to improve water quality in this part of the state of Oregon. And I think we certainly can look back, hopefully in a few years, this will be precedent setting for other locations in the state who are battling with water quality, both surface and groundwater. So, Director, thank you very much. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. All right. We have virtually, and a kind of a question mark, if Carrie Brookshire is going to be testifying, and if so, you're up. Oh, you're here. That's what I thought. It was like, okay, great. I thought I saw you back there. Thank you, Carrie.
I'm bringing Dale with me, because in an effort to be quick, figured we'd go together.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. And again, your name's for the record, so, okay, great, thank you.
Carrie Brookshire with the Klamath County Cattlewomen and also representing the Klamath Cattlemen.
Dale Robnett with Diamondus Meat Company, and also I am on the Klamath County's Wolf Advisory Board.
Great, thank you.
So I'm representing the group, and we basically have two questions. One is, with the increase in the preventative cost that has to be put out, how are we going to ensure that there is enough funding for that 2-year period to cover the deprivation, especially with the cattle prices as they are?
Okay, so
These are not questions you have to answer.
Right, this will be for the RAC for the future.
Okay, and then the other was, once you do find shortfallings, is there some type of a plan as to where you would go after additional funds? So not just have you calculated properly for the funds you have, but next step is when you do find you're short, what is the plan? So that's our two
big questions. Okay.
And I think my question was answered earlier, that it is the RAC that's going to decide what rules our county will have now with these changes and how we can implement the money to the producers, because that's the biggest part, is we want to make sure that the producers get their payback. And I think I've been on the board for several years, and the highest amount of deprivations we've had in Klamath County was 6 head in 1 year for one season. And so I was just trying to do the math with cattle prices, and now that we would be required to put 50% into non-lethal versus, where the balance was.
Which is a statutory.
Yes, and that'll come out with the other stuff. So that was my answer to my question.
Thank you. We'll appreciate the two of you. Anything else? You still have a green light?
Oh, I want everybody else to have their voices heard.
We're good.
Excellent. I just want to make
Sorry
sure.
about that mix up there. Thank you. Appreciate that. So next on our list is okay. We actually, Lauren, thank you. I think we've got the technical difficulties worked out. And Lauren Kinsey, great.
Can you hear me?
We sure can. Thank you.
Man, I will just say that I was talking, and I'm sorry about that. Okay. Chair Miller, Director Sharplow Hanson, Lauren Kinsey here for Oregon Farm Bureau. Many of our more than 6,500 members are directly impacted by livestock losses due to predator depredation, particularly from wolves. Oregon Farm Bureau is in strong support of this and was active in the passage of Senate Bill 777 as it strengthens the program to ensure producers are fairly compensated when livestock or working dogs are injured or killed by wolves. The challenge of coexisting with wildlife has always been and will always be an ongoing reality for our producers. As you all know, our policy supports this compensation, and this challenge will continue to be an ongoing reality. The proposed multiplier is a helpful start, and it's essential acknowledgement of the real cost of raising livestock in wolf country. there are real questions to ask, and we are looking forward to the RAC process. I've heard from some of our folks that a more streamlined process would be helpful. I just want to underscore that Farm Bureau is not advocating for useless, no one's targeting wolves, and we really want to underscore the importance of balancing the realities of predator coexistence with the need to protect these ag livelihoods. So I know that there's a lot to discuss in this process. I just want to say that Farm Bureau would request to have livestock producers included on the RAC. Happy to assist with that. Conservation is important, and I do want to underscore that, but let's ensure that those who are on the ground dealing with this critical issue are in the room and making those decisions. And we are certainly happy to be a partner and appreciate all the work that you guys do. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Appreciate that. Next is Ryan Craybill with Oregon Farm Bureau. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem. Go back to back. We'll get it done. For the record, Ryan Craybill with the Oregon Farm Bureau. Thank you so much for the time to be here today and for taking comments. The last time I spoke to the Board of Ag or spoke with the Board of Ag was December, I think, of last year, and kind of gave you a brief update on kind of where we were as an ag economy. And I kind of wanted to follow up a little bit on that, but also just kind of touch on the Lubguama process as well. Because I think that the context for the ag economy is kind of the tapestry on which all of the rest of these items are being discussed, and those are important to consider. So on Wednesday, just this last Wednesday, U.S. Department of Agriculture issued its farm forecast for 2025. So that was the first forecast in 6 months that they provided. And just a couple of key points that I want to touch on. The net farm income forecast for 2025 is projected at about 180 billion, which is up 52 billion from the 128 billion in 2024, or 40.7% increase. This sounds great. However, much of that is due to government assistance funds that were a topic of conversation at the end of last year and into the beginning of this year. That has since materialized. And so I think it was there's been about a 300% increase in government assistance in 2025 versus 2024, bringing that total from last year, which was about 11 billion, up to over 40 billion dollars in government assistance, just to kind of help keep that farm economy afloat. Another key part of all of this, which I think is timely to discuss and was touched on in terms of kind of the multiplier effect related to wolf depredation. The cattle forecast, it's kind of is actually high. Right now, crops are pretty low in terms of where the value is there, but cattle on the other side of the coin is extremely high. Almost record-setting. So they are projecting an increase of over $17.5 billion from $112 billion in 2024 to $129.7 billion this year, which would be a record high if those numbers materialize. So just as context, and then so in conclusion, on the economic side of things. It's kind of a tale of two sectors when it comes to the ag economy, cattle and crops. Cattle is a really great story right now, but there's a lot of challenges that go into that. But then on the other side, on the crop side, things are still not settled out, and so what you're seeing is government assistance rather than market fundamentals is really what's been a key part of that forecasted that improvement in forecast for 2025. So that's just kind of the preliminary ag economy outlook, and then also just as far as the RAC process goes for the Lower Umatilla Basin. We want to really express our appreciation to the members of that RAC who have been participating so capably on that and committing a lot of time and energy on that. We would, I think you've heard comments from folks who we would associate ourselves with closely, so I won't relitigate those, but Oregonians for Food and Shelter's comments, which you have in written form, I think are very, have done a very good job of elucidating some of those issues are. So
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan.
Good to see
Appreciate
you.
it. Good deal. Good to see you. All right. Up is Ron Anderson, I assume local rancher. So, Ron.
My name is Ron Anderson. I am a rancher out of the Butte Falls area. Thank you, Chairman Miller and the Board of Ag to let me express some things here today. I'm asking for help. OR7, I don't know what year they brought him to the Rogue Valley, but he was a known cattle killer when they brought him there. And they put him at the Milmar Ranch, which is not very far from my ranch. A little bit later, they hauled in a female. So they started a pack in our area, which is, to my knowledge, has never ever had wolves. But here's the situation. On June 18th of 24, I was at my house. My wife was there, my granddaughter was there, my hired man was there. Here comes a 500 and some pound heifer calf right through our front yard with a big black wolf chasing her. That wolf had already been a holdover and ate up her hind legs and hindquarters like you cannot believe. I never seen an animal so traumatized in my life. Well, when the wolf seen me, he stopped, but he was right there at the yard gate. I did tell them guys from U.S. Wildlife Services and ODF&W if I'd have had a rifle, I'd have killed him right there in my yard. Because I believe I have the right to protect my property and myself. My cattle, I think, are my property. So I'm here to ask for help from you people. I'm going to give you some update on this year. June 19th, they spotted 5 wolves out on our allotment. They had a bunch of cows and calves circled up. They killed 1 cow. On 8/5, on property. On 8/7, the drone with Wildlife Services flew that night to protect us and spotted 11 wolves from the drone. On 8/8, they flew the drone again and they seen the same amount of wolves. On August the 9th, the drone went back up, and I hadn't talked to that person at this point, and I called ODF&W, and I said, you know, I got a real problem. I got 11 wolves on this ranch, and we're not going to be able to tolerate that. He says, no, last night they counted 14. So that's what I've been putting up with. The most recent kill I've had was Wednesday, this week. I was at a memorial service and I got a call that some BLM guys had seen some wolves chewing on a great big heifer calf. Well, by the time they got to her, she was dead and they were chewing on her. My neighbor, who is back here today, and my employee went up there and spotted that. But let me give you a rundown. I don't know what year they brought OR7, but in 19 we lost 4 big weaned calves in our pasture. In 2020 we lost 2 steers in our own pasture. In 2021 I had 5 weaned steers killed, 3 of them one night. We go out first thing on a morning and there's 3 dead steers in our field. I mean, calves that weigh 650 to 700 pounds. This time they didn't eat them all, but they ate a little bit on all of them. I really think they killed for fun that time. 22, I couldn't find my records. But in 23, I had 3 weaned steers killed. And that same time, we had a bunch of calves we weaned. We always ear tag them when we wean them and revaccinate and everything. Well, they run a bunch of them off of our property back out onto the range. So we had a heck of a time regathering them. 2024, I had 7 killed on our ranch. That was a year ago. June, well, I already told you about the cow along the highway that the 5 wolves had circled up.
Yeah. And Mr. Anderson, we're going to have to wrap up pretty quick, but.
Okay, well, that's it. That's basically what I wanted to say. But one thing I want to tell you, I seen a picture of a wolf and he looks beautiful there. You know what I see? When they get done with them, there's nothing left but a hide. And they pull them down from the rear end and they start eating on them when they're alive. We see this all the time. And people don't realize how big these wolves are and how dangerous they are. I'm just asking for help. That's part of my story. I got a lot more.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate that. All right. Next up is Bill Lehman, Klamath Watershed Partnership. All right. Great. And note the lights there for just giving you some timing. So thank you.
Hi, I appreciate you having me, and I had no idea I was on the comment list. I was here to just to learn and provide support. I have had some thoughts. You've got the state, the feds, and the county, trying to deal with this issue. I am curious in different counties around the state if there is more support through SWCDs and watershed councils. I represent the Watershed Council for Klamath County. Here in Klamath, right now our SWCD doesn't have a lot of bandwidth. I am on the Wolf Depredation Committee, and what I see is you've got, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I wasn't expecting to speak on this. You've got Wildlife Services, you've got, the county funds. There seems to be a lack of prevention support, and I'm hoping that the counties can sort of reach out to those SWCDs, and maybe it works differently in a county where you have a tax base that supports the SWCD, but a lot of these guys just need help. Like, I don't know, as the Watershed Council representative, when there's a time that someone is dealing with this, because that's private information between landowners and the state. But what I proposed is that, there's a network of folks in each county who can provide mitigation and prevention support. I guess that's all I have to say.
Well, appreciate that, and I think we may have gotten our list of attendees mixed up with our list of speakers. So thanks for your impromptu comments there. Appreciate it. And the last one up, and make sure well, actually, there's two others potentially up, is Joseph Vale, Defenders of Wildlife. Did you plan to speak? Just to make sure. Okay, good. All right.
I can be brief.
Again, you'll have 3 minutes. So,
Chair Miller and members of the board, thanks for the opportunity to comment on the implementation of Senate Bill 777. I am Joseph Vale, and I'm the senior representative at Defenders of Wildlife in our Northwest office, but I do live in Southern Oregon, so thanks for having this meeting so close to home. Defenders, I think it was mentioned, has a long history in supporting wolf recovery, but also standing with ranchers and rural communities trying to reduce conflict with wolves. So just as an example, we provided compensation before there was actually a compensation program in the state of Oregon. And we're also part of the working group that helped develop the program that was established in 2011. Just a few comments for your consideration in the rulemaking. It was mentioned that without more funding, Senate Bill 777 introduces these changes that could divert funding from the non-lethals. So it was mentioned that there's a 50% requirement, but historically much more than 50% has been going to the proactive non-lethal conflict prevention. I think it was mentioned 60 to 70%. So it's concerning that without more allocated funding for the program, we might see less money for the non-lethals. In this legislative session, just over $1 million was allocated, but it's with Senate Bill 77, about $2 million would be needed to fully implement both the compensation side and the non-lethal side. So that's concerning and something we need to think about as we move forward. Another thing that was mentioned is that one of the more effective yet under-resourced tools is the removal of livestock carcasses and bone piles. We really think this is important, and Oregon should explore options for community-wide programs and compost carcass facilities. Other states have done this, like Montana, and it's been very successful. Finally, in the specifics of the rulemaking, we think that a lot can be improved in the program. More consistent fund allocation across the counties, support for those county compensation committees is needed, and just real clear expectations for producers who need to use the program. In sum, we believe that 777 can be implemented in a way that sustains wolf recovery and supports rural communities. And we just really thank ODFW and ODA for the implementation of this program. There's some really hard workers out there and a really great staff that you have implementing this program. Thanks.
Joseph, thank you for your comments. Appreciate that. Just double checking, Lee Bradshaw, are you planning to testify? Excellent. All right, thank you, Lee. Rancher, Oregon Farm Bureau.
Yeah, Jackson County Farm Bureau. Rancher in Eagle Point. My concern is on the cattle too, but is our wildlife population is just went to nothing because of the wolves. In my home ranch, we had a wolf come in and had pushed all the cattle up in a corner right next to the highway, Highway 140 right here. And the government trapper came by and he confirmed a wolf. And we used to have probably 40 head of elk that come into our place every year. Ever since that wolf's been there, them elk have not been back. And our deer population we used to hunt out there. We don't even hunt anymore. There's no deer. It's because of these wolves. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right, appreciate your comments, Mr. Bradshaw. We have one additional comment, and well, actually, maybe this was Lee Ray Bradshaw. Pardon?
That's me.
Excellent. Okay.
I just wanted
I just wanted to kind of follow up on what Ron had to say. We talk about ODFW being protecting the wolves and the wolves being endangered in the Conservation Acts. What are we doing to preserve the ranchers? We're 1%. What are we doing to preserve our agriculture? As the generation gets older, these kids don't want to take over these ranches. It's hard work, and it's disheartening when you work all year long and then come towards the end, you go out and you find your heifers killed by the wolves. What are we doing to protect the ranchers and the farmers of our Oregon Department of Agriculture? ODF&W is out there protecting the wolves. Who's protecting us? Why aren't we the endangered species? They talk about the economics going up, but really our numbers are down. Our numbers are down because the family ranches are being sold off. The children don't want to take over, right? They can't make a living. None of our kids want to take over. They're like, we watch you guys work from sun up to sundown and constantly be disheartened. We belong to nonprofits out the wazoo. I'm not kidding you, because that's all we do is advocate for ourselves. Advocate for ourselves. But these groups that are able to have the community come in and fund for the wolves, then they're funded. We're not funded. Who helps us? I don't understand. And so when Ron says he's asking for help, this community, the ranching community, we are 1%. That's it. We're asking you guys for help. Somebody has to protect the rancher and the farmer. Who is that? Help me understand. Who is that protects the rancher and the farmer? Do you guys know? Can you answer?
We actually don't respond to public comments,
Okay.
so sorry. By rule, I think a few people might want to jump in, but no, we don't respond.
Who protects the rancher and the farmer? And that's my biggest thing. I listen to Ron and it almost brings tears to my... It's disheartening.
Thank you, Lee Ray. This wraps up our public comment period, and I really, really appreciate you taking your time to be here in person, particularly, but also virtually. We'll have the Guama discussion next, but it also definitely will, with the wolf deprivation, will help shape and provide information to the RAC to be able to come up with what makes sense going forward. I'll just do a quick reminder, because I know sometimes it gets pretty frustrating. I'm going way off script. That, we as ODA, ODF&W, we basically implement the law, and it's the statutory framework that we have to work with and within, and the money, et cetera. So I know everybody worked really hard on 777, but again, we'll do, I think both agencies do the best we can to be as objective as we can, and then writing the rules then to support that. But I know sometimes as a farmer, I thought, well, why is it that way? Well, the statute says it's that way, and so without legislative change, some things don't change. So hopefully, I won't get fired over that. So anyway, sorry. So thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. And because of timing, let's go ahead and start the La Guama discussion at 10:20. I'm giving the board 13 minutes for a bit of a break. So thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. starting again. If everybody could come and take their seats, please.
These mics.
All right. Grab that extra coffee and we're going to get started again. All right, we'll go ahead and get started again with the presentation for the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area. And I think we are going to have one of our board members who's serving on the RAC, part of that, Eric Oram, Isaac, and Renee. So, but I'd like to actually ask Lisa to say a few words before we kick off.
Thank you, Chair Miller. So I want to say thank you to the team that's been working on this. You don't undertake a project like this one and not expect to have stumbles in process. And what I've heard today and what's been reinforced to me is the process that you all have put in place has been excellent. People have participated, they feel heard. We know we have a ways to go. But thank you for your dedication and devotion to a great process that has allowed a lot of voices to come in. And I know it's been a big lift on a short time frame with a tremendous amount of research. But again, I just, from my heart, much gratitude.
And I will say, obviously this is new. Many states aren't involved in anything like this. So again, the research that you've had, again, I'll echo what Lisa said. So anyway, Eric, are you going to kick this off then?
I will, thank you. For the record, Eric Oram, I'm a board member and farmer. I farm south of the Laguama footprint. So I'm not, my farm is not inside of that footprint. Chair Miller, member of the boards. I guess my comments are going to be similar to some of the ones we've heard previously, but I won't try to repeat some of them. I'll just start out, it's been my pleasure to serve on the Laguama RAC working group. This is the first RAC I've ever been a part of. As a grower and as a board member. Though I'm not very vocal during the online meetings, I do take notes and usually get with Isaac and review concerns from both myself and other stakeholders in the Laguama. Some of the comments I'd like to share today, I don't think yet we have a clear notion of the true cost to implement these rules. I think we're getting there. I probably should go back and thank Sonny and Isaac and Renee. They've been pivotal and they listen to all the stakeholders. And they have asked for cost estimates going forward. I have said from the start, speaking with Isaac and other members of the board, that I feel that ag needs to be part of the solution and show that we're no longer contributing to the problem. I don't, so with this, the process needs credibility. I don't feel that it's meant to be a regulatory burden, but more of a way to take a snapshot of soil nitrate in a given field to help the producer manage inputs more efficiently. And by taking a pre-plant in the spring and a post-harvest in the fall and having a cropping plan as far as your intended crop and your intended yield, I think simplifying the rules
will make it easier for people to participate. I do have a concern. I'm, not sure exactly, and I think it's shared by a lot of the stakeholders in the RAC about how many acres as a percentage would be included in the 1,000-acre limit. If it's in that 50% range, I don't know that the 1,000-acre limit's proper. If it's more in that, if 1,000 and over is that 80% level or more, I think we're covering it. Again, I want to make sure that ag can be the solution, and I don't know that we're the solution if we're not covering enough acres in that 350,000 acre footprint. There's been a few questions and concerns with data, being public information, but realizing that some of the data collected, it'll take years to determine a trend. And I do believe we're on the right track, simplifying and clarifying some language around the nitrogen plan, which is section 12, nitrogen plan evaluation and soil sampling protocol will help. And then I'll just finish up with a quote from a grower that I have spoke to that's in the Laguama and would be covered under these rules. He said it's a heck of a start and will hopefully get a few more operators on board. There's definitely some more accountability to be had out there. This is going to be good for our region. We just need to iron out the details. So with that, I'll pass it on to Renee and Isaac.
Thanks, Eric. Or Director Warren. Chair Miller, Director Sharplow-Hanson, I'm Isaac Stapleton. I'm the Natural Resources Division Director, and I've been leading this effort. And I'll also let Renee introduce herself, who will be giving part of the presentation with me.
Good morning, Chair Miller, directors. My name is Renee Moulin. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And if I may just take a minute, I think the kudos go to the Rules Advisory Committee because they have been absolute stars at reading the incredibly wordy material that I have managed to produce. And not only reading it, but engaging with it, thinking about it, and providing excellent feedback. So the thanks for the process really goes to them.
So I want to start off, not everybody may know what the Laguama is. So the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area, we'll refer to it as a Laguama. It's just easier than saying all of that. So that area has traditionally had high nitrate levels for about 30 years. And recently, about September of last year, the state published a nitrate reduction plan between DEQ, OWRD, and ODA. And within that plan, each agency identified specific actions that we intend to take to help address the nitrate concerns in the region and the impacts to the population and folks' health. And so one of the aspects that ODA listed in that was to establish additional rule requirements for irrigated agriculture in the area to help mitigate additional nitrate pollution to the aquifer. And so that's really like the impetus for these rules and where we've started from. And I think we'll try and address some of the comments that you heard prior to this presentation in the public comment. And I think they did a good job of highlighting some of the areas where we're still struggling with as a RAC and trying to provide additional clarity on what we mean in those sections and how they actually apply. So as we go through, we'll try and touch on each of those. I won't go deep into the rulemaking process because Sunny did a really good job in the prior presentation on wolves, but I did want to say that we do have a really good RAC, as Renee said. It's local community folks, it's growers in the region, it's non-governmental organizations who represent agriculture broadly, environmental groups, and so they have been very instrumental in helping us really hone in these rules to make sure that they're reasonable, that they are easily implementable, and that they actually matter in terms of the ultimate goal. This is a snapshot of the timeline. So like I mentioned, we started developing draft rules back in September. We approached this rulemaking a little bit differently than maybe the Wolf process is. We went ahead and looked at and did a bunch of research to try and identify some basic framework of rules that we could then put in front of the Rules Advisory Committee to chew on and edit and toss out, right, and get some good, honest feedback. So we started that process back in September. We held our first Rules Advisory Committee meeting in March, and then we've been doing monthly meetings since then. The process has been slow on purpose because I think it's really imperative that we get this right. It was mentioned by Director Sharplow-Hanson that this is new groundbreaking stuff, right? So we need to make sure that we're very deliberate in how we do this and are reasonable in our process. We are planning currently to have public hearings probably in November. So we'll go out for public comment in October, likely hold public hearing in November, consider those public comments, and then put final rules out after that. So that's kind of like what our timeline looks like. I know one of the commenters earlier mentioned additional RAC meetings. That's certainly something that the agency would consider. We're not on a mandated timeline. Our goal in the nitrate reduction plan was by 2026. And so we do have flexibility in this process, and it's worth getting it right. This slide shows basically just the complexity of the nitrogen cycle. It's a naturally occurring process. Nitrogen exists in the environment. We also add it in for agricultural production, and it's imperative for ag to be able to use nitrogen for production, for crop yields, maximization, and use. And I don't think that getting a zero nitrogen loss is realistic. It is a complex natural system. And so our expectation is not 100% use efficiency on nitrogen because we know that's not actually possible, and nor should we try and strive for that exactly. But what we do need to strive for is reduction in any loss that impacts the groundwater. And so that's really where we're focused on. You can kind of think about the nitrogen cycle and nitrogen inputs as like that piggy bank, right? So there's naturally existing nitrogen in the soil due to breakdown of organic matters and things like that. And then we add fertilizers in for crop production, and then the crops take that out and utilize that for that beneficial purpose of growing a crop. So we're trying to balance that piggy bank and make sure that what we're putting in, we're taking out and not allowing to leach. So just it's kind of a nice way to think about you're putting it in, it's there and it's available for when you need it, and then we're not losing any of it. Well, not any, but. So our control strategies really focused around looking at fertilizer application rates according to crop need, and we'll go into more of this in detail when we actually get into the rule sections. But looking at the loading in the soils in the crop zone, and how do we make sure that whatever is a residual leftover is there for the crop and taken into account into a plan for use later, and then making sure that we're not moving any of that nitrogen that's stored in that soil profile for crops out of that crop root zone through irrigation practices. Some of the principles we tried to make sure were reflective in the rules is, like Director Orm mentioned, that ag is part of the solution. And so we wanted to make sure that we left a lot of the control for the management decisions on farm in growers' hands. We're not growers, we don't know their operations or their crops specifically. They do. What we approached the rules with was establishing basic B&P requirements mostly, you can think of them that way, that growers would need to follow to make sure that they're thinking about and making those management decisions, and that there's documentation that they've done so. And so that's really what the rules are kind of oriented around. There's components in here about assessment. So you plan for your cropping season and your crops, and then how do you look at, how that plan played out for you and what adjustments you need to do for adaptive management for the next crop coming in. And with that, I think we can move to Renee to kind of go into some more of the high-level details of the rules themselves.
Thank you. So I don't stand on formality, so if you have any questions while I'm giving this presentation, please feel free to pipe up, and I'm happy to stop and try to explain. This first slide here kind of talks about the rule structure, or the program structure, because it's kind of important to understand it. First, you have the bigger subset, which are rules that apply to all landowners, and that includes the prohibited acts and application rates and restrictions, irrigation management, because we think irrigation to prevent driving nitrate into the groundwater is a super important component of this program, and animal pasturing. And then we have a subset of the rules that govern only large irrigated acreages. And for now, we are talking about acreages that are 1,000 acres or more. And so the subset of rules that governs large irrigated acreages talks more about best management practices, but in the format of an assessment tool. So we're trying to give a format for growers to think about as they're managing their nitrogen, and a framework for thinking about that, rather than prescribing certain practices, because as Isaac was pointing out, we understand how complex these systems are and how folks need flexibility to be able to manage their properties according to their own knowledge base. So first of all, rules governing everybody, prohibited acts. One of the big ones is that we're asking folks to not apply nitrogen in a manner that causes nitrates to migrate into the groundwater. So basically, this is an articulation of an existing statute that prohibits waste from being placed in a manner where they are likely to escape into waters of the state. And groundwaters are considered waters of the state in Oregon. Next one. Another prohibited act is not placing fertilizers, fumigants, or pesticides into the groundwater via well casings or backflow devices. And then the third prohibition is not violating the provisions of the rules. So that's the prohibited acts. The next set of rules that govern everybody are the land application rates and restrictions. And these apply to everyone, no matter what the size of your operation is. And the first one, and all of them, just to back up for a minute, we're trying to implement the 4 R's of nutrient management that are put forward by the USDA, and that is applying fertilizer, the right fertilizer, at the right time, at the right amount, to the right place. So all of these rules are trying to implement those management practices that USDA prescribes. So as far as figuring out what to place and at the right time, one of the key components of the application rates and restrictions is finding out what's in your soil piggy bank as far as nitrogen before you decide what to add. So it's really just taking a look at what's there, and then you can decide what you need to put on. So that's a very key component of the land application rates and restrictions. Now, the rules do ask for soil testing, which is new for folks, and we understand that could be a fiscal issue for a lot of people, but basically we're asking people to follow protocol that have been developed by the Oregon State University Extension Service as far as taking composite samples at the 0 to 24 foot inch depth. Really a big lift there. And finding out what's in the soil at the crop root depth, and then figuring out where to go from there. The other thing that we're asking people to do is not apply fertilizers to frozen soils, to snow-covered soils, saturated soils. And then the last one is we're asking people not to apply synthetic fertilizers to bare fields if it's longer than 30 days from planting. So we don't want people to put a bunch of synthetic fertilizer down 40 to 50 days before they plant, so that there's an opportunity for rains to leach that nitrogen into the soil without the plants utilizing it. Different rule for compost and manure. We understand that there are different dynamics with the way that those materials break down, and there's not as much of a risk for nitrate leaching for those materials. So we've excluded from feedback from the RAC that prohibition for the 30 days within planting applies only to synthetic fertilizers. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Questions? Go ahead.
Kirk Mogg for the record. When it said prior to first application, is that first application after the rules are adopted, annual, what?
So that is a great question, and what we're thinking is it should be the first application in the spring. We understand that not all cropping systems are going to be planting in the spring, but before your first crop for that year.
Prior to the first application for a particular crop.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, so you know what your starting point is in the soil and what additional nutrients are needed. Yep.
Yeah, the whole rule framework is centered around kind of that model of the soil piggy bank, nitrogen inputs minus what you're taking out with the crop or with your residues, and then leaving as little as possible in the soil piggy bank.
Go ahead.
So thank you, Ellie Norris for the record. So this is regardless of the size of the operation.
That's correct.
And if they haven't previously done soil test or leaf analysis, it is a cost that they will have to take over. Who is going to be doing the analysis and the justification for the recommendation of the fertilizers if they don't have access or haven't used like an agronomist or someone to give them that recommendation
Sure.
in the past?
Great question. So in my mind, I envision that hopefully the ODA will have right now we have like a list of references that we've been posting on the RAC webpage with the links to the different articles. And so the articles are provided by OSU Extension, and they provide all the protocol and they provide the agronomic advice about what you're looking for according to whatever crop it is you're growing and how to collect the samples. So we're leaving that to the experts, and we hope to provide resources so that people can readily access them.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Go
Okay.
ahead.
And so I know this is at the beginning of planning of this, who is going to be coming up or back behind to look at these justifications and making sure that people are doing the right steps for the applications?
It's a good question.
Go ahead.
So I think the way the program is structured for folks that fall into this category of everyone who's not large, it's still similar to our water quality program where it would be a complaint-based compliance program. There could potentially also be like an audit of a grower, but it would primarily rely on complaint-based compliance. So that's how we would follow up with a grower to say, hey, like, what are you doing? Are you keeping the records that are required in this? Did you take your soil samples? Like, how's that working?
And the other thing I should mention about the application program that's going to be new is that we're going to be asking people to keep track, like to document their application rate and when they applied and how much and where. We're asking people to keep those records for themselves because we're hoping that people are going to start using these rules as a method for helping them manage their lands. I mean, it's for them, right? And so that's kind of a new piece as well. But the records are not submitted to the Department of Agriculture, to be clear.
That was intentional to address some of those privacy concerns around on-farm data and records. So.
Chair,
yes.
So at least in the beginning of this process, when you roll it out next year, there isn't any intentions on having any annual inspections as part of this program?
No, so in the rule, we've written that the ODA is not going to start assessing the program for at least 3 years after the effective date of the rules. We understand that these are complex systems and it takes a while to start, implementing these measures and keeping track. And we don't expect that even, a few years of data are really going to be that, conclusive. But we're trying to get people to start thinking about things in this way. So at least not for 3 years at least.
And we have additional information later on in the presentation about that too. So
great. Let's go ahead and continue. Thank you.
So the next piece that applies to everybody is irrigation water management. Now this is a really important part of assuring that nitrates that are leached don't reach groundwater where they become waste. So we have some rules that govern irrigation. And basically what it is go out there and figure out what your soil moisture is before you start irrigating. Figure out what your crop needs. Be really clear about that. And then make sure that you apply what your crop needs and stop. So in other words, don't apply water to the point where you're exceeding your field capacity. So that's the saturation point. So you don't want, if you think of a potted plant, you don't want to keep watering and watering and watering until it's coming way out the bottom and gushes. You want to be able to apply just what you need. So that's the gist of that program.
Okay. Josh had a question. I didn't see that his hand was raised. So Josh, you want to chime in with your question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't see him.
Thanks, Elin. I wasn't sure if anybody's paying attention to the hand raising thing, but I had a sort of a comment question. Like a lot of what is being described is basically like modern cost, how do I want to put this? Like cost efficient farming. So nitrogen typically isn't free. So a lot of farmers are already doing this as far as I know. And the one thing that sort of caught my eye, and water is obviously not free either. Running electricity to run your pumps is a major expense nowadays. I was wondering though, like one of the slides mentioned something about backflow devices or like wells. Is that an actual like? Are people putting pesticides or nitrogen into their wells directly? Because I just thought that was interesting. The well casing. There you go. Yeah, that's the slide. Yeah, I was wondering if that's actually addressing something that's actually happening, or if it's just sort of pointing out something obvious. I've never heard that sort of thing before.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So that portion there, it's not that people are putting fertilizer or pesticides in their wells directly. It's relating to needing to have a backflow device. There's a lot of the pivots, right? They'll do fertigation through the lines or pesticide applications through the irrigation system, and so that's ensuring that folks have the proper protection should there be a system loss of pressure, that it doesn't immediately back siphon into a well and directly impact groundwater. WRD has complementary rules that also address backflow protections, and so it's just reaffirming in these ones that that's an expectation.
Director Norris, I think you had a follow-up.
I do. So just since I don't farm in this region, is it common practice for farms to have moisture probes and to know their soil moisture before they do applications of water?
So I hope it's common practice. I mean, we're not prescribing how you're supposed to figure out soil moisture, so it's not like you have to, have fancy equipment. You can go out there and do the good old grab test with your hand. Mm-hmm. But it's just getting people to start really paying attention to that before irrigating.
There's online OpenET that helps you calculate what your crop use is and what you need to apply to maintain soil moisture. And so there are some tools that are low cost for growers to use, or is the fancy moisture probes that you have throughout the fields. But we are also letting growers make the management decision about how they're going to look at and evaluate their irrigation needs before applying.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we're not asking people to put into complicated, very expensive practices or systems to Correct. Make this work.
Yeah.
No,
and that's part of trying to make sure that these rules are reasonable and implementable, that we don't want to be overly burdensome in what we're trying to do here, but we do want to have assurance that best management practices are occurring and that people are considering these factors as they operate in the region.
I think we had Director Hansen.
So there's a variety of irrigation methods, I think, that are used across the state, right? We have some very modern systems and we have some older systems with flood and rill irrigation. How does that play into these rules if it's one of those older systems that is flood type irrigation?
Director Hansen, that's such a tough question, but it's such a good one and key, because we know that there is flood irrigation happening out there. So, you know, I think that's going to be a challenge for some folks. And, you know, I don't know enough about flood irrigation to know if you can actually, you know, I'm sure there are people out there who are skilled enough with flood irrigation that they can figure out how much they need to put on their fields and to assure that they're not going beyond the crop root depth when they're saturating the soils. I don't know, but I think it could be a problem. However, we're not prescribing a system of irrigation in these rules. We're not prohibiting flood irrigation with these rules. But I think that people who are flood irrigating are going to have a hard time figuring out how to manage their water system so that they're not saturating beyond the crop root depth. Yeah.
Director Allen, did you have a follow-up? I wasn't sure if you had your hand up. Okay. I do want to follow up too, because I do think this is a pretty sticky wicket, and depending upon the language, because, well, especially from a flood irrigation standpoint, because you do the, you know, anyway, all the graphs that the university provides you. And so I think we've just got to be really, really, really careful, because I think a lot of growers, you know, it's exceedingly expensive to understand what that water profile is in a, you know, in an analysis way. So again, just seeing this, this has got me nervous. So anyway.
Yeah, but again, I think to that point, and that's why we've tried to leave the language in here broad and giving the grower the decision-making capability of how are you going to evaluate your crop water needs. We're not saying that you must do this, but we're saying that you can't apply water to the point where you are pushing past the root zone and putting, now your nitrogen is now waste into groundwater. So like that's what we're trying to balance, making sure that growers are thinking about what they're doing and not just applying water because it needs it, and so we're just going to turn it on, and we don't know how much we're applying, and we don't know what the crop demand actually is.
Okay, and that may be impossible for flood.
It could be.
And if that's the case, that's a really big thing to think about, because of disease for overhead and other things that you've got to be able to deal with if you go to a different practice. So anyway, just a note.
I'll just make a quick comment on an example of a flood management practice, I guess you would say, on a given field, whether it's hay or forage or crop. Normal management practices or agronomic practices would be flooding the field, of course, when the water is available. After that, and this is something that we do, take a soil test. After you've completed your flood, take a soil test. In that soil test, you're going to have what your starting nitrogen rates are. Also in that soil test, you're going to have moisture down to wherever your management level was. Did you take the top 3 feet? You're going to have moisture levels in all 3 of those feet on your test. And then from there, we apply our nitrogen, usually to an already growing crop that we've already planted or seeded. As an example, alfalfa would already be growing most likely. We would just, after our soil test, we would take the analysis and put on a recommended rate from our agronomists from that point. And by the time, if you go in with a second flooding later in the season after your first cutting, that nitrogen that you applied is already into the management zone, into the root zone of that growing plant. And so you're not going to get wash off or off the top of the field. So it's not like you're going to take a soil test, apply your fertilizer to the top of the ground, and then flood it, and just because it's just going to wash down the creek, down the ditch and back into the creek. So, I mean, I think it just comes to common sense agronomic management practices. The guys that are already irrigating know what those practices are, and I think what Isaac was getting to was just because it's not in the wording, it was left broad intentionally. So.
Yeah, we're providing goals, like where you're supposed to be in the rules, and then leaving it up to the growers to figure out, how to manage their crops to meet those goals.
Okay.
I just wanted to chime in. Part of my comment was I really appreciate the broad language that's being used here, and I think that a lot of farmers in the area are probably already doing a lot of these things, as Eric's alluded to. So I think this is actually going to be pretty comforting for farmers versus what some of the other things that were probably suggested. And I think it also offers the public, the other folks in the area, a good idea, of what's expected, but it's really also just kind of pointing out, if it sort of points out what they're already doing, if they're being careful, which most folks are nowadays. So anyway, another comment.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Thank you.
The next section that applies to everybody is animal pasturing. And so basically, we're asking landowners that are grazing livestock on pasture within the Lebguama to determine appropriate stocking rates and rotate livestock to prevent bare ground. So that's the big goal there. And to manage heavy manure in heavy use areas to prevent nitrate leaching into the groundwater. So during the winter in particular, if you've got a heavy use area that the animals are centered around, to manage manure in that area by, scraping it and piling it and covering the manure piles so that it doesn't leach out into the groundwater. We're asking folks who are managing pasture to also control their irrigation so that moisture does not exceed the soil's field capacity for the forage crop. And then if applying fertilizer, to first conduct a soil test to determine plant available nitrogen. So basically the same things. So that's it for the rules that govern everyone. I'm going to now focus on the large irrigated acreage program. So this is 1,000 acres or more. And again, the key components of this program are focusing on the 4 R's and implementing that. And the draft rules are really intended to create a mechanism for growers to be able to carefully assess their management practices to conform with the goals of applying only what you need, et cetera, and not applying too much irrigation water. So the first component of the large irrigated plan.
Before we move to the next slide,
sorry.
I know there was public comment about the 1,000 acres and how we got there and where that kind of fits in. And this is one of those points where we are continuing to wrestle with what does that look like. As Director Orr mentioned, like if it covers a certain part of that landmass, like, okay, that makes sense. But how much does that really cover? The agency's at a bit of a disadvantage with data in this respect because we don't have data on how many growers that are there, how many acres each one farm. You don't need a permit to farm. So it's not data that's collected to us. We've had to look at USDA census data and try and get a sense. And so we use this as a starting point. It's certainly something that could be adjusted. I've talked to some growers in the region who anticipate that there's probably 10 plus or minus growers who will fit into this and potentially cover about 70% of the acreage in the area. But until the program actually has people submitting a plan or a certification of the acreage and what they're doing, it's hard for us to actually know what that is, like with actual hard numbers.
Okay, so the most important component of the large irrigated program is the annual nitrogen plan. So a nitrogen plan is valuable for understanding nitrogen use on a specific site. An annual nitrogen plan focuses on the inputs of nitrogen, and we're trying to implement, again, the 4 R's of nutrient management through the plan components. Really important to a plan is establishing an agronomic application rate to assure that the amount of nitrogen applied is only the amount necessary to achieve estimated crop yield. without leaching nitrate beyond the crop root zone. And then the draft rules provide for evaluating performance on the annual nitrogen plan at the end of the year, so that you form your plan at the beginning of the year, you carry out your plan, and then at the end of the year, you assess how well you performed on your plan, whether things happened that you didn't expect, or if you were pretty much on par with what you expected or otherwise. And then whether your assessment then leads you into determining what you should do next year. So I'll go over that in a minute here. So I think the next slide, please. So an annual nitrogen plan is an assessment tool. It is not a regulatory tool. So people are keeping these records, and we're developing worksheets to implement these rules so that people don't have to sit down and read the rules and then write this all out on a piece of paper. We're trying to develop a system of worksheets that people can fill out so that it's really quite easy to create your annual nitrogen plan. It's a matter of going through the boxes and filling in what you're doing and checking things off. But if you mess up on your annual nitrogen plan, let's say you create a plan and then you're completely off the mark, ODA is not going to come in and start regulating against you because you didn't meet your annual nitrogen plan. Again, this is for the grower. If you don't meet your annual nitrogen plan, then the rules express a series of options of what you can do to adaptively manage your fields to get closer to where you intend to be. So I just wanted to emphasize that ODA does not require growers to submit their annual nitrogen plans. We only require growers to submit proof that they have created an annual nitrogen plan. So that's an important point. So this slide shows you in picture form what we're trying to get at in the rule. So you create your annual nitrogen plan for year one. Then you assess your annual nitrogen plan. How did I do? Was I off the mark? Was I close? And then you look at the system of adaptive management measures that are in rule, and that informs your practices for year two. So then in year two, you implement the what I learned from year one into the year two of your annual nitrogen plan. And then you go through the process again. You evaluate your plan at the end of year two, and you look at the table. Was I on the mark? Was I not? If I wasn't, then I will adopt these additional adaptive management measures, and that loops into year three. So it's supposed to be an iterative process that helps growers fine-tune their nitrogen management measures. So we talked a lot about inputs, which is figuring out what your agronomic application rate is. As far as outputs, the post-harvest summary record is supposed to be a report card for how well you did on your annual nitrogen plan. We provide 3 methods for evaluating how you did on your plan. One is just a partial nitrogen budget, total applied minus total taken off equals how much is left over. We also provide the option of taking post-harvest soil nitrate samples. And then we also provide the option of just gauging how well you did according to whether or not you met or exceeded your estimated crop yield.
And again, that assessment, whatever the grower comes up with when they look at that, that's not a compliance point for the agency. And so I think that can be potentially made more clear in the rule language to be that these aren't compliance components for the agency when looking at this. These are tools for the grower to really look at their plan. How did I do? Did I have a crop failure? Was there a drought? Like, what does that mean for my residual left over in the soil? And then how do I plan for that in the future? Again, these are basic practices a lot of people are already doing, but the rules set a baseline of expectations for people to be evaluating this. And so we have assurance that people are going through this process and thinking very diligently about the operations and how they're capturing and managing their nitrogen.
Yeah, I guess I've got a follow-up question. I think all that is great from a framing expectations and all that, and it's really a tool for, looking forward. But when it comes the time of this toward the end of, that depth measurement of where that nitrogen is at, is it up or down or whatever, and you would mention, of course, that it's 3 years but it's definitely more over time that you've got to look at trends. Still, I'm just worried about that correlation being relevant to the management practices that grower is using. And you're saying that you won't be really regulating off of that, but I'm just trying to connect those dots with how well the program is working and what adjustments. Anyway.
Yeah, I think as we get to some of the slides, we can touch on that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, hold that thought. That's a really good discussion to have.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are like the annual nitrogen plan. The grower develops that for themselves, and they figure out how well they did by using the methods for evaluation that are described in the rule. And then they, adopt management practices as they may need to try to get closer to their goals. So that piece of it is with the grower, and all of the documents that are used to keep track of all that are held with the grower at their site. They are not submitted to the ODA. ODA just wants to know that you're going through that exercise. This slide here kind of describes the adaptive management measures that I was talking about. So let's say you did fine on your annual nitrogen plan, then you don't have to change your practices. You're doing fine. Keep doing what you're doing. If you get a no in year one, then the table in the rules describes here's what you should try. Like you might want to try cover cropping, or you might want to try some other nitrogen management methods. And then if year two, if you're still not meeting your plan, then you would adopt the year one adaptive management measures, plus you would do additional nitrogen management measures that are described in the table. And then the same goes with year three. You would do all of the adaptive management measures from year 1 through 2, and then there would be additional measures. So it's a way of adding additional measures that can help you get your nitrogen practices more in line with where you want to be. And we go all the way through year 6. So just to give you an idea of the rule structure. So I think this is more to your point, Chair Miller, is how are we going to evaluate the program? So there are a few mechanisms. One of them is we're going to, at some point, be auditing records, I guess going on site and taking a look at records and making sure that people are actually keeping them and doing on-farm inspections. And then another method for evaluating the program is determining what percentage of the folks are participating in the LUBGWAMA. A lot of this will be based on the submitted proofs of certification, which are proving that you've completed your plan and that you're doing that every year. The third method that I think you may be alluding to is the residual soil nitrate levels. And so this is a separate component than the farmer's self-evaluation. This would be hopefully a quantitative measure for ODA to determine whether or not the program is working. So what we're trying to do is manage nitrates at the crop root zone to make sure that it's as efficient as possible. We know that there are legacy conditions in the deeper soil levels that are below the crop root zone. So these are deeper soil horizons where there may be latent nitrogen. We want to prevent that level from getting higher and higher, because that would increase the likelihood that it's going to leach into the groundwater. But first, we don't have any data to help us understand what's going on at the deeper soil horizons. So we're asking growers to take deep residual soil nitrate samples the first year, and then thereafter once every 5 years, and to submit that data to the Oregon Department of Agriculture. Now, to be clear, that is not a compliance point. This is ODA gathering information so they can determine how effective the program is. This is not we get a number from a grower and we go out and start with a water quality advisory. This is ODA trying to gather information, because there isn't any right now, and try to build a database so that we get a better understanding of what's going on in the basin, what's going on at those deeper soil horizons. Now, we understand that this is not a perfect mechanism for evaluating the program. We understand that there are a lot of problems associated with drawing conclusions from deep soil samples. We get that. However, it seems to be the lesser of all evils. What are the other ways that we can measure this? Well, we could ask people to put monitoring wells in, up gradient and down gradient, and do water sampling to determine what's going on. That would give us clear data. That's really expensive. It's really unwieldy. We don't want to ask our growers to do that. Another suggestion that is very good scientifically, a great methodology that we don't disagree with at all, is asking people to put suction lysimeters down gradient of their fields. Again, that's really expensive, and that's really inflexible if you have changing cropping patterns. So we felt like as a policy matter, that again is too big of a lift. So it's the lesser of all evils, I think. Now we acknowledge it's not perfect, but that's what, this is the process of thinking that we're going through.
We're trying to keep, so traditionally in the Guama, DEQ has relied on their network of monitoring wells, and they do their trends. Really, when you're looking at monitoring wells, it's a little late, right? We can't make management decisions, or growers can't, to address the nitrogen loss at that point. We don't know when it got there, how long it's been there, where it's moved from. So really, it's looking at that 5-foot depth. This is a better metric for what's happening at the farm level to inform the effectiveness of the program. If we're not looking at that at all, and we're only relying on monitoring wells, we're not really going to get a good assessment of how these rules are playing out in the Guama and how effective they are at preventing additional leaching, or showing, again, to Eric's point, how ag is part of the solution and is utilizing the nitrogen effectively for their crop production.
I'll just, like a question and so the robustness of that 5-foot, and understand it's not perfect, and thank you, yeah. But still, from a credibility standpoint, whatever science is around justifying a 5 and where it's taken and when it's taken and all that kind of stuff, I think is really, really critical. And I think this also goes back to this idea of below root zone water, even way back earlier, that, you should not really be, going below root zone with the water, if I'm understanding correctly. If you're, groundwater, now Guama, I can't speak to groundwater table, but if your groundwater table is at 100 feet, the fact that you're going below the root zone, anyway, I'm worried about flood irrigation with what we've been talking about, but
There's
anyway.
very minimal flood irrigation in this zone, or in this region.
Okay.
It's mostly small pastures in one particular area. It's not commonly used for commercial production.
Okay. Well, again, the precedence of this, I know it's unique for here, but precedence of this elsewhere and what that might create too. So thank you.
Yeah. And, we're still working through a lot of these issues because we understand how tough they are and how complex they are. And we've gotten a lot of really good critical thinking around this, and we're still evaluating the whole thing. But just to let you know, this is what we were thinking and why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Ty?
Ty Cleaver for the record. 2 questions. One, are most of the farms in this area irrigated by surface or groundwater?
Like from their water source?
Mm-hmm.
It's groundwater mostly.
Okay, and then how deep are most of the irrigation wells?
I don't know. That would be a question for Water Resources
Yeah.
Department.
It varies. I mean, there's some shallow alluvial aquifers. There are a lot of shallow alluvial aquifers in that system, but then there are a lot of people who are developing the deep Columbia River basalt, waters. So it really does vary. It depends on, what aquifer you're tapping.
And the current aquifer that has a nitrate pollution is the alluvial aquifer. So that's the one of concern.
Thanks.
So I guess I can, this is the timeline for evaluating the program, and this goes back to questions that we received. So the department shall not conduct an evaluation of the large irrigated acres program for at least that's 3 years. I'm sorry, I changed it to 3 years subsequent to the effective date of the rules. And then the department shall not conduct an evaluation of residual soil nitrate levels until it has a sufficient data set for scientifically acceptable analysis. So if we do get a bunch of data sets that don't fit into any of the models that have been used to calculate this, then I don't know where we'll go from there. But like I said, we're still evaluating how we're going to evaluate the program.
And that 3-year delay in terms of us doing audits and the effectiveness of the program, that's to allow for enough technical outreach and support to help growers understand what they need to do to develop the plans before we'd actually come and look and say, well, do you have your plan? So it's the on-ramp for folks to get into compliance and for us to help support them through that process. Oh, that's our last slide.
So yeah, I'll just leave you that we're still working on some really important issues. The size of the operation that triggers the large irrigated acreage program, that's a big issue we're still working out. Whether to include an option to take soil tests at the management unit level as opposed to just at the field level. We understand that in some situations with the larger irrigated acreages, like taking a test from every field is going to yield a bunch of redundant information that may not be helpful. So we're examining whether or not to add a provision that allows testing it according to a management unit. And then the most interesting topic is how we're going to evaluate the program and whether we're going to use those residual deep soil tests as a method of evaluation. And I'll just let you know on that latter point that we know that it's a practice with DEQ. So there is some precedent with DEQ using that condition to evaluate their permit performance. But we'll keep looking at it. This is it's a process, is what it is. And
Right, any additional questions or comments from the board? Yes.
Kirk Mogg for the record. On the 1,000 acres or whatever it ends up being, are we focused on owner or operator?
Great question.
Both.
Yeah. So the way that the definition is drafted in the rules, it doesn't, the owner operator, it really comes down to who's managing those acres. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the landowner that's responsible. If you are leasing that land to someone, that is the responsible party for developing the plan for those acreages. So I don't know, Renee, if you have it in front of you, but it does pertain to owner or operator, and it's written broadly to encompass like who's actually responsible at the time for managing those acres.
So if there's an owner that owns 1,001 acres, but there are 4 different operators,
then each operator would be responsible for developing an annual nitrogen plan for their particular.
And if they were all under the 1,000 acres, then they wouldn't fall into the need to do that. So if I'm only leasing 400 acres as a grower from a landowner who has 1,000 acres, I'm responsible for those 400 and those management. The landowner isn't responsible because they're not actually operating or managing the farm at that point, right?
So the owner at that point is no one has to comply or to meet the large.
If they're not a large, right? Because they're not actually managing those acres. So it's who's managing it. Could be the owner or the operator.
Okay. Yeah. And is there any kind of affiliate component to it, meaning that if there were 4 different LLCs that are all owned or operated by the same person?
That's a great question.
So I know you'll like this, Kirk. Excuse me, Director Mogg. Sorry. It's statutorily defined in 568-900.
Okay.
And landowner does include operator, and the definition of operator is really complex. So I would recommend, it's in the rules, in the draft rules, But it's a fun march through the statutes if you want to understand the scope.
Okay, thanks.
Director Hansen, did you have?
I think to that question, is there a better word to describe it other than what is statutorily there for landowner in terms of, operator, manager, something that brings that together? Have we found the right word so we don't get tangled up in terms of what the statute says and what we're trying to have as an outcome?
Director Hansen, that's a very helpful observation. We are a bit constrained by how we can interpret the statute. It's pretty prescriptive and it's an exact term. But I will, given that, I'll still take a look at the rules and see if there's an opportunity for interpreting some of those terms to bring a little more clarity.
And I think a final point that I'd like to make is these rules are obviously new. We haven't done groundwater rules like this before in the past. The rulemaking process does put onus on the agency to evaluate your rules 5 years after initial implementation. So there's definitely room for adjustment as we see how these things take place over time. We'll have 2 years of evaluation of folks' plans and how this is actually playing out, where the pieces are, where we may need to make some tweaks or some clarifications because of complexities around owner-operator or some of the short-term lease practices that that happen in that region, where maybe a grower comes in for a single crop cycle and then it goes back to the other person. And so I think there's going to need to be some adjustments after we see how this actually is implemented on the ground, but the process does have that baked in for a reevaluation for sure.
And also, as the whole nitrate question throughout the U.S. is developing, and solutions to deal with that from an agricultural standpoint, if there are some tools that are really working well too, that can be incorporated as well. So okay, great. If there are no other, yes, go ahead.
Mike Dill for the record. Quick question on the 1,000 acres. Is that contiguous land? And if you have, say, you're growing 10 plots of the same crop within, this area, is what you do on one plot or one field representative of what would be happening on all your fields? Or do you have to, does your nitrogen plan have to be specific for each field or block or whatever?
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at is partly what Renee was talking about in terms of field scale versus a management unit. And if you have 10 circles of corn and that's a management unit, it's all the same crop, you're going to manage it the same way, same irrigation. So we're wrestling with how that could be, or should that be how we approach it in the rules, or should it just be at the field scale?
Okay. Sorry if I missed that one.
No, it's okay. It's still one of the points we're definitely wrestling with.
Okay. Well, again, thank you. This is huge. Lots of effort. RAC members, Eric, thank you for serving, and also the ODA team with that. Josh, did you have anything to add? I can't tell if there's a hand up too, and I know Josh may have to jump before too long. So we'll move on to our next topic. Thank you all very much. Next agenda item is agenda item 13, and that is our board resolution. And just in a nutshell, in December, we'll review all the resolutions up for consideration with recommendations that will come from staff for 2026, and we'll kind of then chart the course for next steps there. But we did still have Rule 319, climate change resolution, which we had received very extensive comments previously. The team worked on with a board member making those revisions off of comments they wanted to look at to accept. And so we had that in front of us as the 319 amended resolution. And so in order to try to keep things moving. We received an additional comment, but I think it was very similar to the comments that they previously presented. So, so it's really up to the board, and I don't know if anyone wants to speak to the work that was done. I think Jonathan and others were involved in the discussion, and Isaac as well. So, but I would entertain a motion to move forward with the amendments to 319 as presented, but if we want some discussion in advance, that's fine.
Kirk Mogg, for the record, I would move to approve as presented.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Is there a second?
Ellie Norris, I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed resolution amendments as presented. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions or, okay, that's unanimous. All right, thank you very much. That's helpful and getting us kind of back on time, which is great. We are 6 minutes late for our public comment. We do have some other things that are going to need some board a board vote later on, but I think we're going to be fine with quorum. Josh, even with you needing to take off if that ends up having to be the case. So as we look at the sign up for the public comment period, we have, just make sure I've got, I think we actually have some duplicates here. So we already did Lauren, Kinsey, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we did not. Catherine Brookhauser-Heron, I think we already did. Okay. Okay. New, yes, thank you. New is Una Johnson, who is virtual, that wants to talk about wolf depredation. So Una, we'll give you 3 minutes here.
Hi there. Thank you for having this meeting and allowing us the opportunity to ask questions. So I had a question. We live in Warm Springs, which is a reservation, and we just found out that Jefferson County and Wasco County aren't set up they did not set up their wolf depredation committee or program. So from what I was told is they can't apply for funding, but we're partially in Jefferson County and partially in Wasco County. But we did set up our wolf depredation program, but we're told that we cannot we cannot apply for any of the wolf depredation programs or receive any compensation of any sort. And there has been some wolf kills. And so we're just trying to find out if Warm Springs, if they could be set up separately or zoned out of, Jefferson County or Wasco County, since they have not applied for these programs.
So you're asking from tribal government, Warm Springs setup? Is that what you're asking? Just for clarification. Okay. All right, Jonathan, and we normally don't respond, but I think this is a kind of important one from a jurisdiction standpoint. So, Jonathan?
Yeah, so Chair Miller, Director Sharple-Hanson, members of the board, Jonathan Santa, Oregon Department of Ag. So, and Sunny is on, and so actually I would encourage you to reach out to us as well, because the relationship between this grant program and then the tribal governments is a little bit nuanced, but in a broad speaking context, the law is pretty specific that it is to the counties, but the tribal entities can apply to the counties. And that relationship does exist, but they do have to have that wolf committee as well. And so there is a little bit of that dueling piece, which I think you just identified as well. But I would actually really just encourage you to reach out to Sunny or myself, and we can we'll be able to kind of really help through it, because there is no just clear-cut answer that we can provide.
Yeah, Una, if we could take that offline with a direct discussion with Jonathan and Sunny, that would be great. But appreciate the question on that, because we have to, again, focus with the statutes. So,
Chair Miller,
all right,
if I
did you
could
have
jump
another
in.
question? Go ahead.
This is Sunny, Chair
Yeah,
Miller,
Sunny.
if I could jump in real
Sure.
quick. As Jonathan said, the tribes cannot apply to ODA directly for those funds. However, I know Jefferson County has reached out to me already to start work on setting up a grant committee. And the counties have, I don't want to say plenty of time, but quite a length of time, about 6 months before the next grant cycle opens, to get their committees established. ODA will also be meeting with some counties and has been having some conversations with the Oregon Association of Counties. So certainly happy to chat with folks from the tribe. And I would encourage you to talk to your county commissioners about getting a committee set up, and happy to work with them directly as well.
Great, thank you. Una, did you have a second question?
Now, these funds, are they reimbursement or are they advance payment for the counties?
It sounds like the county would get a block, but Jonathan, just clarify, and then we'll need to move on. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not a reimbursement where the county expends their own funds and then we reimburse them. We block grant to the county, and then they distribute those funds based on the application process.
And that'll be very clear in the rule too, as that comes out.
And then any funds that aren't utilized goes back to the state, correct?
Correct.
That is correct, but Sunny did an excellent job on spending the program down to about 3 cents this last, like 3 pennies this last biennium, and so we tend to utilize every penny that's sent to us.
All right, great. Una, thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. Okay, we also have virtual Carlos Bonilla, maybe Carlos. You're on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm Carlos Bonilla. I'm professor at the Department of Crop and Soil Science at OSU, and also director of the Hermiston Agricultural Research and Extension Center. I'm also chair of the OSU Labwama Working Group, which Dean Simonish established to coordinate the college involvement with the Labwama. As a working group, we have been contributing to the Rules Advisory Committee, and appreciate the opportunity and invitation. Thank you so much for that. And at this time in the process, we consider it convenient to summarize some of our main guidance on the process. So if you give me 2 more minutes, I can give you that quick feedback about our 4 main guidance that we have at this time. The first one relates to nitrogen availability from organic amendments. The current rules report only on total nitrogen, which overlooks the distinction between total nitrogen and plant available nitrogen, particularly in organic amendments such as reused water, dairy compost, or manure. Lumping organic amendments together with a synthetic fertilizer without accounting for nitrogen availability comes with the risk of underrepresentation of the actual agronomic input. So we recommend incorporating estimates using tools like the OSU Organic Fertilizer Calculator or guidelines from OSU Extension publication. This adjustment would align the rules with agronomic reality and support improved nutrient stewardship. The second one relates to application and removal of nitrogen. The OSU work group believes an application and removal assessment of nitrogen from farms in the impacted area would be beneficial, creating a foundational database that could be used to evaluate on-farm nitrogen management. The quantity of applied nitrogen is a record that farmers keep track of. Nitrogen removal can be determined from the amount of biomass removed from the field and specific crop coefficient values. The third one relates to the nitrate leaching through the Vado zone, and we have visited some of the things during this meeting this morning. Groundwater nitrate levels often respond slowly to improved farming practices, so measurable aquifer improvements can take years or decades, but there is a need for early quantitative evidence of that nitrate leaching is being reduced. So real-time continuous vital zone monitoring using advanced sensors and water samples collection techniques can provide this evidence. And finally, pilot test and actual farms. Testing the draft rules and procedures on a smaller scale will help uncover challenges, allowing for adjustment before full implementation and minimizing risk. Pilot tests on selected actual farms also provide insights into the resources required, leading to more accurate budgeting and efficient resource management. Early improvement of farmers and other early involvement of farmers and other industry stakeholders during pilot test fosters collaboration and builds support for new rules. So as a group, we believe that these ideas will be beneficial in shaping the rules and ultimately lead to a more successful implementation. So our group and I are available to discuss this further at your convenience. That's all I want to contribute today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, Dr. Bonilla.
Thank you so much.
All right. I don't think we have anyone else up for public comment. So we will move on to actually we'll probably skip our OWEB report since Barbara is not here. And we'll go into, Josh, you're still with us, Josh. So what I might do is move around. Can we move around anything that needs a vote to have Josh here for it? So that would only be the last one, election of officers. So we have election of officers. Director Hansen, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Annually, the board elects officers, chair and vice chair. The chair and the vice chair, I think over the last year, has worked very closely with staff at ODA in terms of helping us learn to format these meetings in a way that hopefully is more meaningful and bringing more substance to all of you. I think we in the past have had processes where we would have had a nominations committee. Because of the current public rules, meetings rules, that's changed a little bit. But I think that there are some options that I've had some conversations with people.
Okay. Ty?
Can I nominate Elon Miller?
Okay, is that a motion for?
Yes.
Okay. For chair. Okay. All right. This is a little awkward here. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to nominate Elon Miller for chair for yet another year. Any further discussion or nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Motion. Okay, motion carries. We also need to have a vice chair nominated. Is there a nomination for vice chair?
I move to nominate Eric Orm for vice chair.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that, Mike Dill, for the record.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to nominate, much more comfortable now with with the nomination. So any further discussion?
I don't know if it's discussion, but I just want to say as a new board member, I really appreciate the consistency of having leadership remain the same for, over the first couple meetings, the first year, so that us new members, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the other members, but there are several of us that are in our first year or so. And so I think so far it's been very helpful for me, and I think that would be great to see another, cycle, another year of your leadership. And so I fully support this and just want to thank you for being fabulous mentors to us new board members.
Great.
Thank you.
Director Orm?
Eric Orm, for the record. I'd like to expand on that just a little bit that Mike said. I agree. I think as a board, there's a lot of us that are younger board members that don't have the years of experience. And I think by extending it longer than a year, I think is going to be beneficial for the board going forward. So, thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Director.
Mike Dill, for the record, just to follow up to that, because as someone who sits on multiple boards, I'm just continue to be surprised at how differently so many boards operate, whether they're working boards or advisory boards. So again, even if you have board experience, which I do, seeing how this board operates is different than some of the other working boards that I'm on. And so again, yes, just very, very much appreciate it. And I thank both of you for continuing in your roles.
Well, I'll just make a comment and say thank you, and it's a pleasure being able to serve on this board, and especially with such great board members. So we've got a lot ahead of us, and certainly the ODA team is fantastic. So appreciate the confidence. Let's go ahead and vote on our vice chair position with Eric Worm. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, great. I think. Okay, next, newsletter topics. You know, we talk about each quarter with the board what kind of things we want to report on that happened at this meeting, other things in between, any other discussions. So I'll open it to some comments. And again, John, we really appreciate, you know, Sherry was kind of part-time and doing all these other things. And yes, I know you have other responsibilities too, John, but more focused on this. So we'll be definitely getting some additional support from John, but it is up to us as board members to provide some ideas and comments as far as shaping the messages that we want to send. So I'll open it to ideas. Director Norris.
I think highlighting the farm to school program that's happening here in the basin would be fantastic.
Okay. And John, let's make sure you're keeping notes on this, farm to school. All right. I also don't know exactly how we frame, but for me, there were a lot of ahas down here for water. And what, for many people in the state, I think just the understanding of what has occurred and what will be occurring and needs for the future. So I think that one's going to be a toughie to write, but that would be one that I think was really important out of this meeting too. So, and we are going to make assignments after this too. So anyway, of who's going to help write those pieces. So. All right. Is there anything, Director Hansen, for the travels you had and the noteworthy things that you kind of started our meeting off with?
A couple other things I think might be interesting in the newsletter. You had more public comment and public participation in this meeting, in person and online, than what I remember us having in quite some time. And so thinking about, some of that public comment in areas that are a little trickier, where we heard some passion plea for some of the challenges that people are facing. So are there any of those items we would want to talk about, some of that challenge of coexistence in the space of wildlife and livestock depredation? I think there was very moving testimony there. I also think you had a presentation, and we tried something a little different with the board, with the Lubguama presentation, and where we're at in this rulemaking process and what we've learned, and to have having the engagement with all of you and the questions may be something to highlight in terms of that work, because there has been a tremendous amount of work by staff, by the RAC members, and this board has heard about
Along
that
the way.
process along the way. And we're getting to a place, we likely will have something with it on the agenda in December because of the timing in the process. But I think that has been, from my seat, just so incredibly helpful and rewarding in this process of something that was put on my plate when I came back to the department to get it moving, and it is moving. And we have, I believe, the board has played a big role in helping that move along as well.
Great. I would echo that. Again, it was just, how we capture that public comment, how we capture the process that we're, the transparency, I think, that we've got going for input in important things, Laguama and also the wolf depredation arena. So that's a newsletter. That's a newsletter. So now do I have some volunteers for each of those pieces? And again, the challenge we have now with the public meeting law, that we can't, it's a public meeting if more than one of us is involved in working with staff on writing things. So we need a designee for each of these, unless you have other legal no, go go ahead, Kirk.
I was going to volunteer to do all of them. Kirk Mogg, for the record, I would take on the wolf piece.
Thank you, Kirk. Great. Okay. All right. And with the wolf piece, I think just if we can also frame it with, input for public comments and all of that kind of, process. Kirk, thank you. I appreciate that. Good deal. All right. Ellie?
I'll take the farm to school piece.
Thank you, Ellie. I appreciate that too. All right. All right. What about Laguama? Eric serves on the RAC, and so is it really fair? Should one of us take it instead?
Eric Orm, I can take on the RAC. It'll be part 2 because I think it was in last.
Yeah, I think it would be part 2 too.
I can work with Isaac and we'll come up with something.
Okay. All right. That work for everybody unless anybody else has really burning interest in doing that. So, okay, well, we've got that assigned. That's fantastic, and really appreciate that we've got that going. For a couple years, we didn't have that going, so this is great that we've got newsletter moving forward.
You missed a toughie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's going to help with water.
Yo.
Pardon? A water.
Water,
Oh,
yeah.
geez, yeah, that is a yeah. Maybe because it was a toughie, I missed it. Yes, in fact, it was one of that. Yeah, So I mentioned it, so maybe that's going to be a problem. So I would be happy to help, but Ty, would you?
I would be happy to work on that one.
Ty, thank you. Okay. Excellent.
Okay, for the record, not happy, but willing.
Well, if you can write about water as well as you barbecue, we're in good shape. So anyway, okay, good deal. All right, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for catching that. So newsletter topics, check. 2026 meeting dates and locations. We did under tab 15, just so everybody looks and checks. Thank you for putting this in place. What was it, 2 meetings or 3 meetings ago that we finally decided we're going to try to land at a certain week in the month every quarter, so we'll be consistent, which will also assist us in potential joint meetings with other board. We've been talking about EQC, we've been talking about other boards that we may want to end up, OWEB and others we may want to meet with in the future, but those are the dates. What we don't have are, and we could go ahead and take a minute to to brainstorm location at this stage. They're open now. So we've got 2026 and 2027. We're going to be at the FFA convention in Redmond. And again, what it looks like is we'd arrive on Tuesday night. We'd have our meeting Wednesday all day. And then Thursday, we'd end by 2. We would not do any kind of a tour because being at the FFA convention is kind of that in itself. And I believe that you guys have found a location for us, which is not easy, especially during FFA convention, of a hotel downtown Redmond. And you've got the room block actually lasting until Saturday morning.
We can possibly do till Saturday. Right now, I have it with checkout Friday.
Okay.
Let me know if you want that extended.
Okay. So as we get closer to this, and if there's a way we, just have that flexibility, as we get closer, we'll ask FFA just what other things, and I don't know if you may have already responded back to me, Kirk. So Kirk's been so involved with how state convention runs and where we might be involved, but that evening on Thursday, would be like our community dinner, because that is the partners dinner, and 300 people show up, maybe about 300 people show up to that, of leaders in ag industry. So we'll be part of that dinner that evening. And then we have an ODA booth. There's potential judging and some other stuff. And Kirk, can you think of anything else that might be board involvement?
No, I mean, other than just attending.
Yeah, and attending the session. So we'll go to thank you. We'll go to the dinner, and then immediately we'll go over and attend that session, which is pretty inspiring if you've not sat through a opening session and a session at the state convention. So it's pretty cool. So that's kind of that format. So that's going to be in Redmond. But then we've got June, September, and December. And also attached was where we've been in the past is that next sheet. So do we want to kind of throw out some things now?
Throw out a couple of it.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we've been to the South Coast. And so that's one of the places that I have sort of thought about. The other place, Central Oregon. We talked a little bit about the rapeseed control areas over there and looking at that. They've also been through a lot of drought issues because they're junior users in the system and going through a lot of different things. So you could think about Central Oregon, whether that be Jefferson County or Prineville-ish. I think it's been a while since we've been to Prineville. Madras? Yeah, okay.
Madras?
Madras.
Okay. Madras, maybe June. Madras? Is that good timing for things? Okay. And then when we say South Coast, what?
So you're thinking like Coos, South Coast?
Brookings down in.
Oh, even further south?
South Coast, yeah.
Okay, Brookings or.
We've done meetings. I remember doing a long time ago a meeting in Brookings. I think we did one at one of the casinos. No, it might have been Coos Bay. It's been a while though.
Okay. Okay. Well, we can look at, again, locations. I do think having this kind of a setup, again, Ty, thank you for getting us in here. Having a setup where we've got the hotel the same place as the meeting location and all of that is just so much easier. So with South Coast, that might be one of the challenges of the where on that. So,
yeah.
Director Dill.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, and I think it's by chance for the next 2 years, but September meeting will be within summer break for kids, just because Labor Day is, I think, like the 6th and the 7th those years. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity. I know I would likely bring my family to one of these great areas that we're going to. Like, if this would have been a week earlier, I probably would have brought my my family with me to explore the area. So I mean, I think Southern Oregon, like the Southern Coast, would be fantastic, a good place for people to, it's not one that people would venture to as often as maybe like a more central location. So just keeping that in mind as we pick locations for the, the September meetings for this year and next year, is that they will fall into that summer break period still, before kids go back to school.
Director Norris, did you have additional comment or no?
I know that Barbara, since she is not here, I will speak for her. She expressed desire to have something near McMinnville in that area in the near future, because it's been a while since she's had something around her stomping grounds.
Yeah, we can look at McMinnville for December. How's that? Okay, so we'll kind of say South Coast, Brookings, and maybe north, depending upon, location and finding a spot and all of that kind of thing. Okay, so we've got that set. I don't know if we really need to do 27 yet, but we'll just see how things go. And a lot of times, because if there's issues happening in a certain area, more so than other areas, that will go there.
That's exactly what I was
So
saying.
we need to, and so if something big comes up, we may flex on this a little bit, but right now we'll plan on Madras in June, South Coast in September, and December in
Yamhill, McMinnville.
Okay.
Because they're
Yamhill,
just
okay.
thinking about the facilities,
And costs
that
and,
region.
yeah, okay.
This is Mike Dill again. I had one just suggestion, and maybe we could follow up with OSU at some point to see when they're having field days, because they have really great field days in different locations at their stations. And so it could be great to, kind of piggyback on one of those if it falls within the same date range.
Okay, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And if we could also have an action item, maybe if we ask in advance far enough for some of our compatriot EQC or others to say, hey, what do these dates look like, even if we go into asking them in 27? That might be, that might be something that we can think about. We usually, again, it'll be long session in 27, so we'll be in Salem in March. But anyway. Oh, yes? Oh, Carla. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I had been in contact with the EQC board, and they have a cadence of their meeting dates too, so we just probably need to pick a time that we're close enough together, and we might need to tweak dates, but they've had a lot of changes on their board in the last year, which is why we didn't try to meet here in 2025. So I think we had a focus of 2026, and also I know the Oregon Department of Forestry and their board had an interest at one point of meeting with
Us too. Okay. Can we just explore when their board meetings are, if they're set, now that we have ours set through 27, and then just in December kind of talk about that, if we need to tweak, or honestly, if we do need to have probably if you're together with a board meeting, you'll need maybe even separate time. So we may have to have a special board meeting, but I don't want to go there if we don't have to, so.
I think another option, if we can't get full boards together, is to invite them or a couple of their members to come and join with us.
And we've done that before.
We have done that before. And that is a little simpler logistically sometimes.
Good point. Okay, so let's have a proposal from you guys for what you think might make sense, because then we can, if it's inviting to our board meeting, we can also look at other boards sooner too, to do it. So even if we had a board each meeting come or something like that, so we can update on. Because the relationship, that's something we've heard from our stakeholders, relationship that ODA has with other agencies, even OSHA and other folks is a pretty critical kind of piece. So anyway, okay, great. Is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, thanks everybody. Appreciate Eric, and I appreciate your confidence of yet another year. So anyway, Safe travels home. And Lisa, do you have additional comment?
I just want to thank the board. I really appreciate the engagement in the conversations and the curious minds around some of these tough issues that we're moving forward, and being able to have the conversation here with all of you as we have to make, some of those poignant decisions moving forward. So, thank you for being so engaged and curious and supporting what we hope will work on the land.
Great. Super. All right. Meeting adjourned.